Welcome to our countdown of America's most mysterious towns. Places where everyday facades hide dark, real-life secrets. Today we're uncovering towns that aren't just small dots on a map, but have harbored chilling crimes, eerie disappearances, and unsettling legends. From burning underground fires to unsolved crimes, these stories are as factual as they are fascinating. So buckle up as we journey through forgotten highways and abandoned ghost towns where history has left its most sinister mark. What would you do if a seemingly peaceful town harbored a crime that shocked the nation? Holcomb, Kansas may look like any small Midwestern town, but in 1959 it became the stage for one of America's most infamous crimes. The Clutter family, beloved by their community, had their lives brutally taken in a case that would later inspire Truman Capote's celebrated book, In Cold Blood. The meticulous planning and inexplicable violence and the ensuing investigation turned this quiet town into a symbol of how random evil can shatter lives. Despite the passage of decades, whispers of what really drove the killers and whether justice was ever fully served continue to haunt locals. Holcomb's dark chapter serves as a reminder that even in the heartland, sinister secrets can lurk behind friendly smiles and familiar faces. Could a shadowy figure have once roamed the streets, striking terror into the night? Texarkana straddles the border between Texas and Arkansas, a quaint town with an unsettling past. In 1946, the Texarkana moonlight crimes sent shockwaves through this dual-state community. A series of unsolved nighttime attacks left residents living in constant fear as an unknown assailant, dubbed the Phantom Slayer, stalked isolated roads and darkened alleys. The mystery deepened with each unsolved case, fueling local legends and a palpable sense of dread. Despite numerous investigations, the killer was never caught, leaving behind a trail of questions that still intrigue true crime enthusiasts today. Texarkana's legacy is not just about a crime spree, it's about a town that, for a brief time, became the epicenter of terror, where every creak in the night hinted at an unseen danger. What if the very earth beneath you hides secrets of a tragedy so immense that even decades later its full story remains shrouded in mystery? On December 6, 1907, Monongah, West Virginia was rocked by what remains the deadliest coal mining disaster in American history. In a mine owned by Fairmont Coal Company, a sudden explosion, likely triggered by a buildup of methane gas compounded by highly combustible coal dust, swept through the labyrinthine tunnels, claiming the lives of an estimated 362 miners. Survivors later recalled frantic moments in the dark, cramped passages where cries for help were muffled by the chaos of collapsing supports and roaring flames. Multiple investigations pointed to a catastrophic failure in safety protocols. Miners had repeatedly warned about inadequate ventilation and dangerous gas accumulations, yet these pleas were ignored in the relentless pursuit of profit. In the aftermath, whispers of negligence and potential sabotage began to circulate. Some local reports even suggested that powerful industrial interests worked behind the scenes to suppress the full truth, blaming the disaster solely on unforeseeable natural conditions while evading accountability for their gross oversight. Official inquiries were mired in controversy. While some inspectors documented the blatant disregard for safety standards, their findings were largely overshadowed by the coal company's influence over local authorities. Families of the lost pressed for justice, but their calls were stifled by a system more interested in preserving economic interests than uncovering the full scope of the tragedy. Today, the ghostly remains of the old mine entrances stand as a somber memorial. They remind us that beneath the rugged terrain of Monongah lies a story of industrial greed, human error, and a community forever scarred by a disaster that, despite rigorous investigation, still harbors unanswered questions. Have you ever visited a place where sinister cult activity once ruled the day? Located in the rugged hills of Southern California, Spahn Ranch was far more than a decaying movie set for westerns. In the late 1960s, this seemingly innocuous ranch became the infamous base for Charles Manson and his family of followers. Under the guise of a communal retreat, Manson's cult rehearsed their twisted philosophies and plotted crimes that would shock the nation. The ranch's dilapidated barns and dusty trails hide disturbing echoes of that era, a time when manipulation and violence masqueraded as free love. Today, Spahn Ranch is mostly forgotten by the public, but those who know its past past can't help but feel a chill.
The Utah Data Center in Bluffdale is one of the most secretive government facilities you've probably never heard of. That's why it's secret. It's massive, covering about 1 million square feet. It's basically designed to collect, store, and analyze enormous amounts of digital data. Emails, texts, phone calls. This is the NSA's way of monitoring potential threats anywhere in the world. Security here is insanely tight. The building is surrounded by fences, cameras, and armed guards, and the airspace above is heavily restricted. In order for it to run smoothly, the walls are thick and the server rooms are climate controlled down to the tiniest detail. You'll never have a problem with internet crashing at this place. Almost nothing about what goes on site has ever been officially revealed though. Journalists and researchers who've tried to report on it usually end up with very little actual confirmed information. What we do know is that it is involved in mass surveillance. Raven Rock is this enormous underground bunker carved into a mountain in Pennsylvania. They built it back in the early 50s. It's a backup Pentagon. If something catastrophic happened to the capital, the military could keep running from inside this mountain. Raven Rock has its own power plants, water reservoirs, everything you'd need to survive completely cut off from the outside world. Supposedly, it could hold around 3,000 people during an emergency. There is a dental area, a medical area, a dining hall, dorms. It sounds pretty utilitarian, but I bet they have entertainment areas in there too. I mean, they have to. And this place is actually used. It's not just sitting there in case of emergency, but pretty much everything that goes on inside is classified. Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado has a facility many of us have heard about, but almost nobody's ever seen. Buried under about 2,000 feet of solid granite, it used to be the main nerve center for NORAD's aerospace warning and defense operations. Inside the mountain, they built 15 of these 3-story buildings. And all of these buildings are mounted on over 1,000 giant springs. The springs absorb shock from earthquakes, explosions, nuclear blasts. They actually designed this place to survive a 30 megaton nuclear explosion happening just over a mile away. There are these massive blast doors that can seal off different sections, and it's also able to handle high altitude electromagnetic pulses, meaning if there was some kind of nuclear attack that shut down electronics everywhere, this place would still be running. It's probably one of the safest places on the planet. It's been downgraded from its original Cold War mission, but it still operates as a backup command center. Mount Weather is a mountain in Virginia, but underneath it, there's this bunker called the High Point Special Facility. This place was built to house high-ranking military or politicians during a catastrophe. It built it during the Cold War, and it's fully equipped with everything. It has its own water supply, power generators, communication systems, and not only did they make it functional, they made it livable. Again, not sure what kind of entertainment they have down there, but I've heard of there being big movie theaters in some of these places, which doesn't sound all that outlandish. Mount Weather also works as one of FEMA's main command centers. During a crisis, they can coordinate emergency response from there, broadcast communications, and use it as a relocation point for important government branches. It's actually pretty well known. The government doesn't hide that it exists, they just don't tell you anything about what actually happens inside. Dugway Proving Ground is this huge remote army testing facility in Utah's Great Salt Lake Desert. Since 1942, they've been running experiments on chemical and biological weapons. These days, it is less about offensive use and more about figuring out how to detect these things and survive them. Supposedly, that is. They've got these huge target areas marked with perfect circles. That's where they release test chemicals and track how they spread under different weather conditions. Things have gone wrong here before. In 1968, a nerve agent called VX accidentally got outside the base, killed a bunch of sheep. That's the kind of stuff they're working with. Obviously, you can't just visit Dugway, but back in 2014, they let a photographer named David Maisel in, but only after months of vetting, and he had to be escorted the entire time. Dugway Proving Ground became an obsession for him long before he ever set foot inside. Back in 2003, he was flying over the Great Salt Lake for another project when he noticed this strange grid of tiny buildings lined up in perfect rows. It turned out to be an army depot where the US had been storing around 30 million pounds of aging chemical weapons. Everything from mustard gas to sarin, all the worst stuff you can think of. He tried to get permission in 2004 to visit, but the Pentagon denied him, obviously. But almost a decade later, in 2014, they finally gave him the green light. He started on the ground, photographing the structures built to test how chemical agents spread. Later, he moved to the air, snapping images of those massive circles and grids carved into the desert floor that I talked about earlier.
What if the face you trust hides a monster in plain sight? Wichita, Kansas, a city known for its friendly Midwestern charm, became infamous as the hunting ground for one of America's most notorious serial killers, BTK. Between 1974 and 1991, Dennis Rader terrorized this unsuspecting community by binding, harming, and taking the lives of his victims, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy as a family man and community leader. His ability to hide in plain sight, working by day and unleashing unspeakable horror by night, turned Wichita's calm streets into a backdrop for terror. The painstaking investigation and eventual capture only scratched the surface of the underlying darkness that had been lurking. Rader's crimes not only scarred a community, but also reshaped the way law enforcement looks at ordinary individuals with extraordinary secrets. What dark truths lie behind the genteel charm of a southern town? Deep in the heart of Mississippi, the town of Forest became a silent witness of the brutal realities of racial terror during the Jim Crow era. Behind its picturesque scenery, a series of unspeakable acts, lynchings, violent assaults, and other racially motivated crimes tore through the black community. Although official records often offer scant details, oral histories and local accounts paint a chilling picture of a time when terror was a tool of control and the cries for justice were buried under layers of systemic prejudice. The legacy of these crimes in Forest is not just a part of history, it is a lingering reminder of the deep scars left by intolerance and the courageous struggle for dignity and equality. How do you unravel a mystery when the killer leaves no trace behind? In the late 1970s, the small town of Van Buren, Arkansas, was rocked by a chilling crime committed against a respected local entrepreneur. A beloved community figure, his untimely death in a quiet residential neighborhood sent shockwaves through the town. Despite a thorough investigation and fervent local outcry, the case went cold, leaving behind a legacy of whispered suspicions and lingering distrust. Residents recall that night with a mix of disbelief and sorrow, as the unsolved crime became a symbol of how sometimes, even in the tight-knit corners of America, darkness can strike without warning. The unresolved mystery in Van Buren still invites questions as locals continue to search for the truth behind a crime that stole a cherished life. Can the lure of fortune lead to a trail of blood and betrayal? Dahlonega, Georgia is celebrated for its glittering past during the gold rush era, yet beneath the shine of newfound wealth lies a darker narrative. As prospectors flooded into the town in the mid-19th century, the competition for gold led to a series of violent crimes and unsolved crimes. Rivalries quickly turned deadly, neighbors betrayed one another, and mysterious disappearances added to the town's growing notoriety. Some local accounts even speak of cursed claims and spectral warnings among the hillsides. The bloodshed of Dahloneg's gold rush is a reminder that the pursuit of fortune often came with a deadly price. Even today, the historic streets of Dahlonega echo with the tragic legacy of greed, ambition, and the human cost of a glittering dream gone horribly wrong. What happens when the fight for workers' rights is met with brutal injustice? Bisbee, Arizona may now be celebrated for its quirky art scene and vintage charm, but in 1917, this once thriving mining town witnessed one of the darkest labor abuses in American history. During a period of fierce union activism, over 1,000 miners and supporters were forcibly removed from Bisbee in an event known as Bisbee deportation. Under the guise of maintaining order, local authorities and powerful mine owners rounded up striking workers and their families, stripping them of their rights and dignity. Many were detained under inhumane conditions, and the true extent of the human cost remains shrouded in mystery. This violent suppression not only scarred the community, but also sent shockwaves throughout the nation, exposing the dangerous intersection of industrial might and state power. Today, while Bisbee embraces its colorful present, the echoes of that turbulent past serve as a haunting reminder of what happens when justice is sacrificed at the altar of profit. What if the most baffling mysteries aren't from outer space, but from right here on Earth? Not on this list for the reasons you might think today. While Roswell is widely known for its its alleged extraterrestrial encounters, the town's history hides another layer of darkness. In the 1940s, amidst Cold War paranoia and rapid military expansion, Roswell was also the scene of a series of baffling disappearances and violent crimes that were swept under the rug by local authorities. Rumors swirled that a notorious criminal network had infiltrated the area and that evidence of their activities was deliberately suppressed to protect powerful interests. Though overshadowed by the UFO legends, is that a coincidence or not, these events remain a controversial chapter in Roswell's past. For many locals, the true mystery lies not in alien visitations, but in the betrayal and secrecy that marked a turbulent period of American history, where truth was hidden behind layers of official denials and unyielding silence.
Plum Island is this small island off the coast of Long Island, New York. It's home to the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, where the government researches some of the most dangerous animal diseases. The facility has been around since 1954. They set it up to study foreign animal diseases, and right now, it's one of the only places in the entire United States where they work with live foot and mouth disease samples. This virus spreads insanely fast in animals, so most labs aren't allowed anywhere near it. They also did biological weapon research targeting livestock here during the Cold War. They stopped doing that in 1969. The island is completely locked down, only authorized personnel are allowed in, and they work in biosafety level 3 labs because some of these pathogens are incredibly dangerous. One mistake and you could have a disease outbreak. There's actually a controversial future for Plum Island though. The facility is being phased out and there's plans to close it around 2028. They're moving operations to a new lab in Kansas, and people have some mixed feelings about that. Some think it's safer to keep this kind of research on, an island where containment is obviously easier, but others think a modern facility makes more sense. The Hanford site in Washington state is this massive contaminated area left over from America's Cold War nuclear program. During World War II and the years after, Hanford produced plutonium for nuclear weapons. Today, it's one of the most contaminated sites in the entire country, and huge sections are completely off limits to the public. The site covers about 580 square miles. Most of it is a secured zone because of all the radioactive and chemical waste left behind from decades of weapons production. The groundwater under large parts of this site is still way above safe pollution limits, and that's after decades of cleanup. A lot of the danger comes from these massive underground tanks filled with radioactive sludge. They were only ever meant to be temporary, but now everyone's trying to figure out how to safely deal with what's inside them. It's going to take decades to fully clean up. Y-12 in Oak Ridge, Tennessee is one of the central hubs of America's nuclear weapons programs. They built it during the Manhattan Project, and it's still running today, doing basically the same kind of work. The main mission at Y-12 is handling weapons-grade uranium. They make parts for nuclear warheads, they take old ones apart, store the material, and they supply uranium for some of the Navy's nuclear subs. As you can imagine, security is incredibly tight here. It's not open to public tours, period. Some of the older buildings that handled plutonium and enriched uranium are so dangerous they're being deactivated or just torn down. It's a huge environmental effort happening behind the scenes just to keep contamination contained. Kings Bay in Georgia plays a huge role in what's called the nuclear triad, the 3 ways the US could deliver nuclear weapons: by land, by aircraft, and by submarines. Kings Bay is responsible for the submarine part. It's a naval submarine base, one of the most strategic bases in the US. This is where the country keeps its Ohio-class nuclear ballistic missile submarines, basically giant submarines built to carry long-range nuclear missiles called Trident missiles. These subs are a major part of how the US deters nuclear attacks because they can hide deep in the ocean and still launch a strike if needed. Kings Bay also has a huge repair and maintenance center called the Trident Refit Facility, where crews work on the subs so they can stay out at sea for long stretches of time. There's also the Strategic Weapons Facility, which is where they store and handle the nuclear warheads. Extremely dangerous work, and the base has training areas for submarine crews. The land around the base is fenced off, the waterfront is restricted, and there's constant monitoring. So, Fort Knox. Basically, this massive vault sitting inside an army base in Kentucky, it holds an enormous amount of gold. To say this place is insanely locked down would be an understatement. The vault door is 21 inches thick, 21 inches. Not only does it weigh over 20 tons, it's also made from this special steel that drills and torches can't even get through. So you're not breaking the door, but what about the combination? Well, that is on a 100-hour time clock. That means even if you had the combination, you couldn't just open it whenever you wanted. The timer has to run out first. You've also got fences all around it, night vision cameras everywhere, microphones picking up the smallest of sounds, and the US Mint Police constantly patrolling. Nobody even knows the full combination to open the door. Each staff member only knows their piece of it, so you'd need multiple people just to get it open. Almost nothing ever leaves this vault. They take tiny test samples during audits every now and then, but actual gold moving in or out, that barely happens.
A telephone building in downtown Milwaukee is guarded like a military bunker, and no one understands why a phone company needs this level of security. This building has no windows, no public entrances, and no company signage. It is a part of AT&T's old Long Lines network, a series of hardened communication centers built during the Cold War. While most Long Lines sites have been decommissioned, the Milwaukee building is the exception. It is protected 24 hours a day by armed security, reinforced steel doors, and surveillance cameras that point at every angle of the sidewalk. Eyewitnesses report guards approaching anyone who lingers near the building for too long, and leaked NSA documents revealed that AT&T facilities were used as interception points for classified monitoring programs. Surfers at Point Mugu keep seeing armed guards appear out of nowhere on the cliffs. That is when people realized there were tunnels under the beach. Point Mugu Naval Base sits along the California coastline. Everyone knows about the visible runways and aircraft hangars, but what the public did not know until recently is that a network of restricted tunnels runs beneath the cliffs. These tunnels were originally built during the Cold War, but instead of sealing them, the Navy reinforced them and expanded them. Today, they are guarded constantly. Even beachgoers who accidentally wander too close to the cliffside entrances are approached by armed patrols. Some of the tunnel entrances are disguised with rock-colored coverings, others are hidden behind locked metal hatches set into the base of the cliffs, and satellite images show ventilation shafts that were added in the last decade, suggesting that the tunnels are still in active use. Under one of the most famous hotels in the world is a classified bunker guarded non-stop, and guests staying above it have no idea it exists. The Waldorf Astoria was more than a luxury hotel. It served as a diplomatic site for US presidents, foreign leaders, and high-ranking officials. To protect these individuals, the government built a hardened underground room known as PEOC East. It was designed as a secure communication bunker, and what makes the Waldorf bunker mysterious is not that it exists, but how it is guarded. Access tunnels leading to it are monitored 24 hours a day by federal agents. Surveillance systems track movement throughout the basement, and specific service elevators are programmed to lock automatically if someone without clearance enters them. The government has never released a description of the bunker's interior. It is unknown whether the bunker is still used or if it has been updated. Even after the hotel changed ownership, federal control of the bunker remained. There is a patch of desert where drones vanish from radar, and the military guards it without telling anyone what is being tested there. Black Dart began as a counter-drone program. The Navy tested detection and interception strategies for unmanned aircraft, but over time the program expanded and moved into a heavily secured zone near Lake China, California. This section of desert is constantly patrolled. It contains large shielded structures, sensor arrays, and underground access points. However, no documents describe what the Navy currently does there. Satellite imagery shows unusual activity, craters appear and disappear, temporary shade structures are built and removed, aircraft without identifiable markings are seen entering the area, yet none of these events appear on public flight logs. What makes this site more mysterious is that the Navy shut down public references to Black Dart years ago. The program still exists, but in total secrecy. A remote patch of desert covered in ancient petroglyphs is protected by armed guards, and the government refuses to say what they built under it. Near Nye County, Nevada, is a canyon filled with ancient rock carvings. Archaeologists have studied the area for decades, but in the early 2000s, a fenced compound was suddenly built near the center of the canyon. This compound is guarded 24 hours a day and includes a large underground entrance. Researchers attempting to document the carvings have been stopped by federal officers and told that the land has been reclassified. No public notice was ever issued. The restricted area contains a single large building, several sensor towers, and ventilation shafts carved into the canyon walls. This suggests that the facility extends deep into the rock, yet there are no documents describing construction, funding, or purpose. There is no proof and no explanation for this intense security. It seems like it is simply a blank space with guards. Mount Weather is already one of the most secret places in America, but there is a second facility nearby that is guarded just as heavily and rarely mentioned anywhere. Part 1 of this series covered the main Mount Weather facility, but what most people do not know is that FEMA operates an auxiliary site only a few miles away. This location is hidden within the Blue Ridge Mountains and is protected at levels identical to the main complex. Residents who live near this auxiliary site report constant patrols, unmarked vehicles, and fences that appear to shift in location over time as the facility expands. Satellite images show new roads carved into the forest, along with reinforced entrances that lead underground. Unlike the primary Mount Weather facility, the auxiliary site has no official name. Government documents refer to it only with coded location numbers, and FEMA refuses to discuss any operations there. The town knows the antennas are there, but no one knows what they are listening to. Sugar Grove is home to one of the most secure communications facilities in the country. While parts of the site have been publicly acknowledged, certain sections remain unlisted and inaccessible. These areas are surrounded by additional fencing and guarded separately from the main facility. Personnel who work in one section are not allowed into the other. Even contractors are restricted based on compartmentalized clearance. Officially, the facility handles satellite communications, but internal documents released through FOIA requests are heavily redacted and provide no detail about specific operations. What is known is that this location operates 24 hours a day and is treated as a high-value intelligence asset. Any approach to restricted zones triggers immediate response, and what the government listens for here and why certain sectors are hidden even from oversight remains unanswered. Everyone talks about the gold vault, but no one talks about the buildings around it. Fort Knox is famous for its gold vault. The vault itself is heavily guarded, which is expected. What is less understood is why several nearby buildings are guarded with the same intensity. These auxiliary structures have no public description, they are not part of the visitor center, they do not house offices, yet armed guards patrol them continuously. Satellite imagery shows that some of these buildings have underground access points. Power and ventilation systems run between them and the main vault. The U.S. Treasury has never explained what these structures contain. Given the level of protection, analysts believe these buildings may store materials beyond gold. Possibilities include classified financial records, emergency currency reserves, or assets not publicly disclosed. Whatever the case, the security suggests these buildings are just as important as the vault itself. This warehouse looks ordinary, but it has armed guards and no public inventory. Located near Palmdale, California, is a FEMA-controlled warehouse that receives regular shipments but has no listed contents. The building is guarded 24 hours a day by federal officers. Unlike typical FEMA warehouses, this facility does not participate in disaster response drills. Its trucks do not deploy during emergencies, yet deliveries continue year-round. The warehouse draws significant power and contains underground storage sections according to construction permits. Surveillance cameras cover the entire perimeter and nearby roads. When journalists attempted to inquire about the warehouse, FEMA declined to provide details and cited national security exemptions. The existence of underground sections suggests long-term storage rather than temporary supplies, but FEMA has never confirmed what is stored there or why it requires constant protection. Cheyenne Mountain is famous, but there are tunnels that extend beyond it government that are not publicly acknowledged. These tunnels are not listed on public diagrams. However, geological surveys and maintenance records confirm their existence. The tunnels are guarded separately from the main complex. Entry points are hidden and monitored. Motion sensors detect movement underground. The government has never explained the purpose of these extended tunnels. They do not appear to be escape routes. They are too large for simple utilities. Former contractors have stated that some sections contain sealed chambers that were never used during their time there. Despite the lack of public purpose, the tunnels remain under constant surveillance. Inside a base known for biological research is a building with no name and non-stop guards. Fort Detrick in Maryland houses major medical research facilities. Most buildings are well documented, but one building is not. This structure has no signage, no public designation, and no accessible records describing its function. It is guarded at all times by military police. Employees working nearby report that deliveries are handled under strict protocols. Access requires clearance beyond what is typical for the base. The Department of Defense has never acknowledged the building publicly. Requests for information are denied. Given Fort Detrick's history, speculation ranges widely, but the truth remains locked behind security checkpoints. There are tunnels under the Capitol that most officials will never see. Washington, D.C. has an extensive underground network. While some tunnels are public knowledge, others are not. Certain access points are guarded around the clock. These entrances lead to underground federal facilities that are not described in any public document. Security cameras monitor these areas constantly. Federal officers restrict access even to maintenance crews. The government has never released a full map of underground federal infrastructure beneath the city. What exists has been pieced together from leaks and construction records. The level of protection suggests these facilities play a critical role in national operations, but exactly what that role is remains unknown. There is a building inside Fort Meade that even soldiers stationed there cannot enter, and no one knows exactly what goes on inside. Fort Meade in Maryland is headquarters to the National Security Agency. The base itself is heavily guarded, but there is one specific building, simply known as OPS 2B, that stands out from the rest. This place is surrounded by its own perimeter inside the base. Access is restricted to a select group of NSA personnel, and even high-ranking officers at Fort Meade do not know what is stored or conducted inside. Contractors who work in other NSA buildings say that the security around this place is drastically stronger and monitors every movement in the surrounding area. This building is known for being windowless, constantly vibrating from the machinery inside, and connected to underground levels that are not documented on any public construction plan. What makes the situation even more unusual is that this place continues to expand. Satellite photos show new armored sections added in the last decade, but no reason has been given for why a single building on an already secure military base requires non-stop, top-tier protection. There is a vault under Manhattan, guarded like a military fortress, and the government will not fully explain what is inside. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York has a vault buried 80 feet below street level. Everyone knows it stores gold. What people do not know is how much security surrounds the vault and why. The vault is monitored 24 hours a day by armed officers, motion sensors, earthquake sensors, and air pressure sensors. These are normally used in nuclear facilities, not financial ones. The deeper corridors require staff to pass through compartments that seal behind them before the next door opens. While the Federal Reserve says the vault stores around 7,000 tons of gold, independent auditors have never been fully allowed access to verify this number. Certain rooms connected to the vault have no public explanation. Even within the Federal Reserve System, only a handful of people have access to the deepest sections. Because the vault sits at one of the lowest bedrock points in Manhattan, some analysts believe it houses emergency backups of financial networks or classified materials completely unrelated to gold. Los Alamos is known for nuclear research, but there are buildings on the campus so restricted that the employees who work next door have never seen the inside. Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico is enormous. Its mission appears scientific, but some of its buildings are treated almost like separate worlds. Technical Area 55 is one example. While the lab publicly states that the area handles plutonium work, certain wings inside TA-55 are completely unlisted. Workers who have spent decades at Los Alamos say they have never been told what goes on in those secured areas. Construction crews brought in to renovate nearby buildings report being escorted away anytime their projects brought them too close. Sensors line the trees near the area, and guards patrol the perimeter non-stop. The government's official explanation has always been that these sections are simply hazardous, but the security goes far beyond standard hazard protocols. These buildings remain active at all hours, lights stay on even during holidays, deliveries come in at night, and audit records for these wings are classified. Locals call it the compound, but no one knows who owns it, and anyone who walks near it is confronted instantly. Hidden in the woods of Warren County, Ohio, is a fenced compound that has been guarded for decades. The fence is topped with razor wire, the perimeter is covered in motion sensors, and the entrance has a guard booth that remains occupied 24 hours a day. The strange part is that the property is not owned by the military, the state, or any company listed in public records. When residents attempted to identify the owner, they found the land is registered to a non-existent corporation that has never filed taxes. Utility records also show something suspicious. The compound draws a steady amount of electricity every day and every night. Even during storms and outages, the power does not fluctuate. Whatever is happening inside requires uninterrupted energy. Yet despite repeated attempts, officials have refused to comment on the facility or confirm which agency controls it. Mount Weather in Virginia looks like a normal wooded mountain from the outside, but beneath the trees is one of the most secret and heavily guarded facilities in the country. It is so secure that almost nothing about what happens inside has ever been released publicly. What we do know goes back to a single catastrophic event. On December 1st, 1974, a TWA flight crashed into the mountain during a storm. Local firefighters rushed toward the impact site, only to be intercepted by federal agents. The rescuers were ordered to leave immediately and were told that the federal government would handle it. This was the first time ordinary Americans even realized there was something inside Mount Weather. Freedom of Information Act requests later revealed that Mount Weather is a continuity of government site. This means that in a national crisis, the country's most important leaders can be evacuated here. But that explanation is only part of the story. The facility has grown over the decades. Additional underground levels exist, but are classified. Entire sections of the compound remain off limits even to government employees without specific clearance. The location is guarded 24 hours a day by armed personnel, motion detectors, and sensors buried underground. Anyone approaching the fences is confronted almost instantly. Despite this, no official document explains what is in the deepest sections of the facility or why it requires continuous military-grade protection even during peaceful times. And that is what keeps Mount Weather on the list. Dulce, New Mexico is a tiny town, but drive toward Archuleta Mesa and the atmosphere changes instantly. Locals warn visitors to stay away. Black SUVs appear seemingly out of nowhere. Motion sensors line the roads, and the closer you get, the clearer it becomes that someone does not want people near the mesa. The federal government denies operating any facility in the area. There are no official buildings listed, no public records, and no acknowledged activities. Yet dozens of eyewitnesses have reported helicopters without markings, bright lights flashing at night, and what looks like the glow of ventilation shafts inside the rock. Whatever is inside Archuleta Mesa has been guarded for decades, and the security has only intensified. With no official explanation, this remains one of the most mysterious, restricted areas in the country. Green Bank is famous for its radio quiet zone. Cell phones, Wi-Fi, and anything that emits radio waves are banned. Everyone thinks the security is because of the massive Green Bank telescope, but this is only part of the story. Residents report that certain wooded areas near the observatory are patrolled constantly. These patrols are not conducted by local police. Witnesses describe unmarked trucks that appear at the exact moment someone wanders too close to specific forested sections. Some of these areas contain fenced-off structures that do not appear on any public map. They are guarded day and night. People have tried to hike around the fences and were intercepted almost instantly by security personnel who refused to identify themselves. Even stranger, the observatory has the authority to shut down electronic devices within the zone without warning. This includes cars, generators, and other equipment, but no one has ever explained why these powers are needed in areas that are nowhere near the telescope. The Teapot Dome scandal involved illegal oil drilling on federal land almost a century ago, and what most people do not know is that part of the land contained enormous natural caverns that later became a restricted site. After the scandal ended, the government sealed off these caverns and placed them under continuous surveillance. Today, the area is surrounded by fences, motion detectors, and armed security. No public tours exist, no geological surveys are allowed, and the Department of Energy refuses to confirm what is stored there. What makes this even more mysterious is that satellite images show ventilation systems and what appear to be reinforced entrances built into the ground, yet there are no public records describing construction at the site. Teapot Dome is a place that the public forgot, but the federal government never stopped watching. Quincy is known for its massive tech presence, including data centers for Microsoft and Yahoo, but locals talk about one facility that stands out from the rest. It is a windowless structure surrounded by cameras, fencing, and armed guards. Unlike the tech centers, this building has no corporate logo, it is not listed on any company website, and it receives deliveries at night from trucks with their license plates covered. Rumors about this building intensified in 2018 when residents reported hearing a deep humming noise coming from underground. Others noticed that the facility stayed bright 24 hours a day, even during storms and power outages that shut down other buildings in the area. Internet analysts noticed that Quincy is the site of a major backbone connection for global communication lines. This has led to speculation that the anonymous building is a government interception point, but no agency has ever confirmed this. Whatever its purpose, the non-stop security makes it clear that someone is protecting something extremely sensitive inside. Most people think Camp David is just a retreat, but very few know what exists beneath it. Camp David in Maryland is widely known as the Presidential Retreat. It is heavily guarded above ground, which makes sense, but below the cabins and forest trails is something rarely discussed. During the Cold War, an underground facility was built beneath Camp David. Officially, it was described as a secure shelter and communications hub. However, documents released decades later show that the underground sections are far larger than the surface complex. The facility includes reinforced chambers, independent power systems, and deep tunnels that connect multiple sections of the property. These areas are guarded constantly by federal security, separate from the guards protecting the surface cabins. What makes this unusual is that Camp David is already close to Washington and already protected by NORAD airspace. The added underground security suggests a function far beyond a simple shelter. Former maintenance workers have stated that there are sealed sections they were never allowed to enter. Even Secret Service personnel assigned to Camp David are restricted from certain underground areas. No official explanation has ever clarified what these deeper sections are used for today or why they remain guarded at all times, even when no president is present. This missile site was officially shut down decades ago, yet it is still guarded like it's operational. Across the United States, former missile sites were decommissioned after the Cold War. Most became parks or were abandoned completely, but one site near Everglades National Park in Florida stands out. This location is fenced, monitored, and patrolled 24 hours a day. Security cameras remain active, gates are locked, and federal officers respond immediately to anyone attempting to access the area. According to public records, the site was deactivated in the 1970s. No weapons are supposed to be stored there, no testing is supposed to occur, yet the infrastructure has been maintained. Satellite imagery shows that underground launch bunkers remain intact, power Power lines still run into the site. Ventilation systems are operational. Local officials have asked why the area remains restricted and receive no answer. The National Park Service defers to federal authorities. The Department of Defense claims no active role, and despite this, guards never leave. For a site that's supposedly empty, it's treated like something inside still matters. This vault stores music and film, but one section is guarded more heavily than the rest, and no one really explains why. Granite Mountain Records Vault in Utah is famous for storing master recordings and films. It is dug into a granite mountain and designed to survive disasters. Most of the facility is well documented, however, there is a restricted wing that is not included in public descriptions or tours. This section is protected by separate security, requires additional clearance, and remains inaccessible even to most vault employees. Former staff have stated that the restricted wing contains materials that are not entertainment related. Deliveries arrive under escort, equipment inside is different from the rest of the vault, and the doors are reinforced far beyond what would be needed to protect audio recordings. The company that operates the vault has never commented on the purpose of the restricted wing, and government agencies have also declined to confirm any involvement. Given the vault's ability to survive nuclear-level disasters, analysts believe the restricted section may store classified data backups or government records, but without confirmation, it remains an unanswered question. There is a base in North Carolina that officially does not exist, but its security is impossible to miss. Harvey Point Defense Testing Activity is located near Hertford, North Carolina. It is commonly associated with the CIA, though the agency rarely acknowledges it publicly. The compound is surrounded by fences, sensors, and armed guards. Airspace above it is restricted, boats are prohibited from approaching the shoreline nearby, and publicly Harvey Point is described as a testing site for equipment, but this explanation does not match the size of the facility or the level of the security. Satellite images reveal mock urban environments, airstrips, firing ranges, and structures designed to resemble foreign cities. Underground sections have been confirmed through construction records, but their purpose remains classified. Despite its size and activity, very little information about Harvey Point has ever been released. Even local government officials are kept at a distance. The facility is real, the guards are real, the reason behind the secrecy remains unknown. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory has a long history of nuclear research. The campus is enormous and much of it is restricted, but several structures known as the unlisted buildings are so secret that even workers with high clearance levels cannot access them. Employees refer to these buildings using codes instead of names. Some lack building numbers entirely. They have no public descriptions, no tours, and no official acknowledgement. Security officers guard the entrances around the clock, and anyone who walks too close is questioned. If you look at satellite views, you can see the structures clearly, but if you overlay the official layout, the buildings vanish. It is as if they have been erased. Former employees have stated that these buildings contain experimental facilities unrelated to public projects. Others believe they house classified energy research, but no one knows why the secrecy needs this level of constant security. Dugway Proving Ground is known for chemical and biological testing. The entire installation is heavily guarded, but the area known only as the restricted zone is treated differently. There are military bases that allow some level of press access, but Dugway does not, and the restricted zone goes even further. Guards patrol the fences 24 hours a day. Sensors cover miles of desert, reinforced checkpoints sit on empty dirt roads, and drones patrol overhead. In 2012, a group of hikers accidentally crossed into an unmarked part of the zone, and within minutes, 4 helicopters surrounded them. They were detained, questioned, and escorted out by armed personnel. The reason behind this extreme security has never been explained. Officially, Dugway handles defense research, but the restricted zone is never mentioned in public reports. Whatever is inside, the government treats it as something far beyond normal military secrecy. In the middle of the desert sits a tunnel system so heavily monitored that even standing near the fence can trigger a security response. Everyone talks about Area 51, but the Nevada National Security Site might be even stranger. Specifically, the location location called the Forgotten Tunnels by locals. These tunnels were originally created for nuclear blast experiments, but after testing ended, instead of sealing them, the government increased the security. Today, the tunnels are surrounded by barbed wire, motion detectors, and long-range cameras. White trucks with government plates patrol the area day and night, and anyone walking near the boundary is stopped. What makes the tunnels mysterious is that no public research has been conducted there in decades. There are no scheduled activities and no official purpose, yet guards protect them continuously. Denver International Airport is famous for conspiracy theories, but the real mystery lies beneath the surface. Construction workers have confirmed that deep underground, tunnels were built during the early development of the airport. These tunnels were supposed to be part of a baggage system, but when the system failed, the tunnels were sealed. Except not all of them were. One section remains active. Employees say that guards stand watch 24 hours a day near service elevators that lead below the airport. These guards are not from airport security, they are federal officers. Whenever maintenance crews request access to the lower levels, they are denied unless a federal escort accompanies them. Even then, workers are only allowed into specific sections. The existence of an underground bunker has been supported by multiple contractor reports, but no agency has admitted what the bunker is used for. Given the size of the airport, analysts believe it may be a continuity of government location, but again, the level of secrecy does not match any official explanation. Denver International Airport's deepest level remains one of the most strange and most secure spots in America. No place in America is guarded more tightly than the mountain that holds Raven Rock, except the second mountain that the government refuses to talk about. Raven Rock in Pennsylvania is a massive underground complex designed to act as a backup Pentagon. It is heavily guarded and well known, but what most people do not know is that there is an extra site located several miles away that receives the same level of protection with none of the public acknowledgement. This second site is visible on satellite images as a fenced-in area with several structures that look similar to Raven Rock. But unlike Raven Rock, it has no records, no designation, and no government statement confirming its purpose. Locals say they regularly see military vehicles entering the private road that leads towards this site. Helicopters circle the area at night, sensors line the woods, and the gate is guarded 24 hours a day by federal officers with no identifying insignia. All we know for certain is that the government guards it intensely and refuses to explain why.
Imagine walking into a modern gift shop in Seattle only to realize that the basement is actually the original front door of a building from the 1800s. In 1889, the Great Seattle Fire leveled 31 blocks of the city. When it came time to rebuild, the city planners faced a massive problem. The original city was built on soggy tidelands, meaning it flooded constantly with, believe it or not, sewage. Their solution was pretty radical. They built massive retaining walls and raised the street level by as much as 22 feet. For a while, citizens had to use ladders to get from the new street down to the old storefronts. Eventually, they paved over the gaps, creating a ceiling for the old city. Walking through here today, you can see the original brickwork, Victorian-era glass skylights embedded in the modern sidewalks above, and even old bathtubs and furniture left behind when the area was condemned in 1907 due to the bubonic plague fears. It sat empty for decades until a local historian began tours in the 1960s. It's a literal time capsule of a frontier town frozen in mud and brick. Beneath the trendy bars of Portland lies a dark labyrinth where, for nearly 100 years, a man could go in for a drink and wake up miles out at sea as a slave. These tunnels, officially known as the Old Town Chinatown Tunnels, connected the basements of many hotels and taverns to the Willamette River. While they were built for moving goods from ships to avoid street traffic, they became the epicenter of Shanghaiing. This was the practice of kidnapping men to serve as sailors. Unsuspecting victims would be dropped through deadfalls, trapdoors built directly into the floor of saloons. Once they fell through, they were held in cramped wooden cells in the tunnels, drugged or beaten, and then moved through the dark passages directly onto waiting ships. These men wouldn't see the sun again until they were far out in the Pacific Ocean. Today, you can see the remnants of the holding cells and the trapdoor mechanisms that facilitated this terrifying underground trade. For over 30 years, one one of the most famous luxury resorts in America was hiding a 112,000 square foot secret designed to save the US government from the end of the world. During the height of the Cold War, the Eisenhower administration made a secret deal with the Greenbrier Resort. Under the guise of building a new wing for the hotel, they excavated a massive bunker 720 feet into the hillside. Codenamed Project Greek Island, it was designed to house the entire US Congress in the event of a nuclear strike. It featured a giant reinforced door that could withstand a blast, a self-contained power plant, a medical clinic with an operating room, and enough bunk beds for 1,100 people. It even had a television studio to broadcast messages to any survivors. The craziest part? The hotel staff had no idea. The people maintaining the bunker posed as TV technicians for a fake company, and the secret was only revealed in 1992 by a Washington Post expose, leading to the facility's decommissioning. You might think the only thing under Manhattan is the subway, but beneath a quiet cathedral in Little Italy, the elite of Old New York are still waiting in the dark. Located beneath the Basilica of St. Patrick's Old Cathedral, these are the only catacombs in Manhattan. Unlike the mass graves of Paris, these are walled catacombs featuring private family vaults. This is where the real-life gangs of New York era figures, wealthy bankers, and Civil War generals are interred. The catacombs are usually off-limits to the public, lit only by candlelight during special tours. It's a silent, eerie world of brick and marble that feels thousands of miles away from the honking taxis just a few feet above you. The vaults belong to families like the Delmonicos and the Durham family who helped build the city into the powerhouse that it is today. What if your morning commute involved driving your car into a literal mountain to get to your office? Welcome to Subtropolis, the world's largest underground business complex. Located 150 feet below the surface of Kansas City, this city was created by mining a 270 million year old limestone deposit. It is massive, spanning over 55 million square feet, with miles of paved roads wide enough for semi-trucks to pass by each other. Because the temperature is a constant natural 65 to 70 degrees, it is the perfect place for companies to store things. The US Postal Service stores millions of stamps here, and the National Archives keeps original film reels of Hollywood classics like The Wizard of Oz. Over 1,600 people go to work here every day in an environment that is completely immune to the Midwestern tornadoes and blizzards happening on the surface. One man, a pickaxe, and 40 years of digging created a Mediterranean resort beneath the California desert. Baldassare Farisier was a Sicilian immigrant who moved to Fresno in 1901 to grow citrus. However, he found the Fresno heat unbearable and the soil too hard for traditional farming, so he started digging. Over the next 4 decades, he excavated a massive home and garden complex spanning 10 acres, all underground. It's an architectural masterpiece with skylights that allow fruit trees like lemons and oranges to grow 20 feet below the surface. He built bedrooms, a kitchen, and even a fish pond. He used no blueprints, just his imagination and his hands. The design allows for natural airflow, keeping the gardens 20 degrees cooler than the surface. It's a stunning example of how one man's desire for comfort created a subterranean paradise. In Atlanta, there's a place where the 19th century literally lives underneath the 20th century. Atlanta raised its streets in the 1920s to build viaducts over the congested railroad tracks. This created a city beneath the city where the original ground level storefronts were suddenly in the dark. For years, these spaces were used for storage or forgotten entirely. Until the late 1960s, it was rediscovered and turned into a massive entertainment district called Underground Atlanta. While it has seen its ups and downs as a mall, the historical architecture remains. You can still see the original ironwork and ornate facades of the 1800s businesses that were once the heartbeat of the city. It's a strange, sprawling labyrinth that serves as a bridge between Atlanta's Civil War era past and its modern skyscrapers. 650 feet below the Kansas wheat fields lies a city of salt that is so massive it has its own railroad and a vault containing the world's most famous secrets. Stratica is a massive salt mine that began operations in 1923. Over a century of mining has created hundreds of miles of tunnels. The air there is incredibly dry and the temperature is constant, which makes it one of the most secure storage facilities on the planet. Deep within the mine, a company called Underground Vaults and Storage keeps some of the world's most valuable treasures. We're talking about the original masters of Star Wars, the glass slippers from The Wizard of Oz, and even secret government documents. Because the salt creates a natural envelope, nothing ever rots or decays. There is an entire infrastructure down there, including a tram system and a gallery that shows what life was like for the miners who spent spent their lives in the white darkness. These caves have seen everything from 19th century mushroom farmers to 1930s gangsters hiding from the FBI. Carved into the soft sandstone of St. Paul, these caves were originally used to grow mushrooms because of the damp, cool environment. But during Prohibition, they took on a much more spirited life. They were converted into an underground nightclub called the Castle Royal. Legend and police records suggest that this was a favorite hangout for notorious gangsters like John Dillinger and Ma Barker. Local stories even claim that 3 gangsters were taken right inside the caves, and their bodies were supposedly buried behind the sandstone walls to avoid police detection. Today, it's one of the few places where you can still visit a real Prohibition-era speakeasy that exists exactly as it did when the jazz was loud and the liquor was illegal. Located inside a 1,000-acre former limestone mine, this is the most secure underground city in the world, and you aren't invited. Iron Mountain is the gold standard of underground storage. This facility is located 220 feet underground and is protected by armed guards and a 12-ton gate. It is not just a storage unit, it's a city with its own fire department, water purification system, and backup generators. What's inside, you ask? The Corbis Photographic Collection, which includes some of the most famous images in human history and the Social Security Administration's records. They even have a massive data center that powers a huge chunk of the internet. It is so deep and so reinforced that it is considered one of the most likely places to survive a global catastrophe. It is the ultimate library of human civilization tucked away in the dark of Pennsylvania. It is wild to think that while we're all worrying about traffic and the weather, that there are people working in salt mines, tourists walking through Victorian basements, and billions of dollars of data sitting in limestone fortresses right beneath our feet. America is a lot deeper than it looks on the surface.
Starting off our list today, we have the Texas Killing Fields. As the name implies, people died there. At least 30, but possibly more. This stretch of land that covers 25 acres is located just outside of Texas City. It is vast, barren, vacant, and apparently the perfect place to hide a body. Since the 1930s, many young women have gone missing in the area surrounding the fields, and while some remain missing to this day, many of the women's bodies have been found discarded in said fields. And the first discovery was made in 1984. A dog carried something its owner originally thought was a ball out of the field, but it turned out to be a human skull. And after that, the floodgates opened. Clyde Edwin Hendrick, John Robert King, Peter Zwarst, Kevin Edinson Smith, and William Lewis Reese were all arrested and imprisoned for separate killings, except for King and Zwarst, who had worked together, meaning that only a total of 4 killings have been solved to date. The killers of the remaining victims, as well as the remaining victims' identities, remain unsolved to this day. Next up, we've got Alton Bridge, also known as Goatman Bridge, located between the Texas cities of Denton and Copper Canyon. The bridge was used from the 1930s all the way up to 2001 when it was closed for vehicle traffic. So yes, it's abandoned, but how has it earned itself a spot on our list today? Well, it's got a pretty dark past, which I will tell you about now. The legend goes that in August of 1938, a successful goat breeder who went by the name of Goatman, but whose real name was Oscar Washburn, hung a sign up on the bridge that read, "This way to the Goatman," which apparently severely pissed off a local radical hate group that I can't say the name of here on YouTube, but they wore white pointed hoods and they were terrible. Probably know who I'm talking about. Well, one of the members of that group took Washburn by force. They brought him to the Alton Bridge and ended his life. They threw him over the side of the bridge, but when they looked down to catch a glimpse of his body, he was nowhere to be found. Enraged, the group made their way to his home and killed his entire family. Since this alleged incident, many people have claimed on many separate occasions to have seen the ghost of Oscar Washburn leading his flock across the bridge in the middle of the night. Next up, we have the Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells, Texas, which is probably one of the most famously abandoned places in the state, according to the internet. Although it's no longer abandoned today, actually it's now a health spa. It was abandoned between the years of 1972 and 2019. The hotel opened its doors in 1929, welcoming people from all over who were attracted to this so-called crazy water with healing powers found in the town of Mineral Wells. Many spirits are said to haunt the hotel, including T.D. Baker, who died in his room of unknown causes after his mistress flung herself from a 7th floor window. Another apparition who calls the hotel home is a bellhop who was cut in half during an elevator accident back in the 1950s. If you already have a fear of elevators, I'm so sorry, that's super gross. Another is a young man who died of leukemia while staying at the hotel. Reports of red lipstick smears appearing out of nowhere, broken glass, windows opening and shutting on their own, along with legitimate ghost sightings, continue to
fascinate visitors of the area and the hotel, both in its abandoned and reopened state. Next up, we have Stewart Mansion, located in Galveston Island, Texas. This area has a rough history. Before the grounds became the resting place of the Stewart Mansion, they had been the campsite of the Karankawa tribe, who were perhaps most well known for eating human flesh. The tribe was also killed on the land by John Lafitte's pirate colony in a gruesome battle. And if that's not bad enough, legend says that the father of the Stewart family went mad and killed his wife and sons, and then allegedly buried them all inside the walls of the mansion before taking his own life shortly thereafter. Many people who visit the now abandoned attraction claim to see the ghosts of the Karankawa peoples along with the ghosts of deceased pirates, as well as a voodoo priestess who many believe was a prisoner of the pirate colony, and of course the ghosts of the Stewarts, who are said to walk the halls regretfully and mournfully. Next up, at our halfway point today, we have the USS Lexington, an Essex-class aircraft carrier, say that 5 times fast, which during the Second World War participated in almost every major operation in the Pacific Theater, which was kind of the Asia-Pacific Wars, and it spent a total of 21 months in combat. As you can imagine, the massive 872-foot vessel has seen a lot of action in its day, but on its final day at sea, the vessel was hit by 2 torpedoes in its hull and it began to sink. 216 crewmen were killed and 2,735 were evacuated. In true naval fashion, the captain, Felix Stump, was the last to disembark the vessel. He did survive, but died of cancer many years later. Thanks to fundraising efforts, the abandoned ship was eventually retrieved from the ocean floor and converted into a museum, which has been referred to as the most haunted in America. It's said that anyone who enters the ship will feel the presence of those who died on board. Next on our list, we have the Old Yorktown Memorial Hospital, which opened in 1951 and was abandoned in 1990, but eventually reopened many years later as a tourist attraction, meaning you can visit it if you want. While this is the case, many people believe that the hospital was never truly vacant, as even after its closure, it was home to the many ghosts that continue to roam its halls. In fact, the attraction is so haunted, it actually appeared numerous times on the reality television show Ghost Adventures. If you guys watch that, I don't know, let me know in the comments. I've never seen it. Perhaps the most famous story that outlines the horrors of the hospital would have to be the one detailing the incompetence of Dr. Leon Norwierski, who slit a patient's throat while performing a procedure on their neck. Whether or not this was an accident is highly debated. Was he incompetent or was he malicious? I don't know. I always like to think incompetence, but the ghost of the deceased patient is said to vengefully roam the halls of the former hospital. And the hospital is also home to a gaggle of ghost nuns who are super strict, and they punish those wearing unacceptable hospital clothing and sporting tattoos by pushing, scratching, or forcing them out of the building. Next up, we have Presidio Nuestra Señora de Loretta de Bahia, a fort whose name I will not be attempting to pronounce again, that was constructed in Texas by the Spanish Army in 1747. And it's the site of the Goliad event, which took place during the Texas Revolution and resulted in the deaths of somewhere between 425 to 445 people. Those who died were Texian army soldiers, prisoners of war to the Mexican army. The hundreds of men were killed with projectiles piled up and set on fire. It's a pretty dark past, so it probably comes as no surprise that the area is obviously super haunted, but what might shock you is the fact that it isn't said to be haunted by any of the men, but rather a woman who lost her lover during the gruesome event. She wanders the grounds of the fort, helplessly searching the graves for a name that can't be found. Many who visit the grounds have also reported hearing cannon fire, banging on the walls, and the strong smell of BLOOD near the fort chapel's courtyard. I'm sorry you guys, I can't say these words on here. Next up, we have a name I can definitely pronounce, Donkey Lady Bridge. We had Goatman and now we've got Donkey Lady. It's located 30 miles southwest of San Antonio, and the bridge is said to be the final resting place of a woman who was raised by donkeys after being abandoned by her parents. In 2006, the San Antonio Express released an article recounting her story. It appears as though while out one day, one of the woman's donkeys bit a man's son. The father was furious and later ambushed the woman and her donkey on the bridge, causing her to fall in the river and drowned. Many people have said that if you drive to the bridge today, turn off your car engine, you'll hear the cries of the woman and her donkey. If you have tried it, if you do try it, let me know. Starting off our top 2, we have the Toya Ghost Town. At its peak in 1910, the town was home to a whopping 1,052 people. Not that much. But today the number has dwindled down to just 57. This is possibly due to the 2004 tornado that devastated the town, leaving the majority of the homes and the volunteer fire department abandoned. While this might sound pretty basic, those who live in the town today tell of something pretty extraordinary. Dark, but extraordinary. Locals believe that the town is occupied by entities, young people with pitch black eyes that go around the town at night, terrorizing its residents, knocking on doors and staring through windows, instilling fear into whoever might meet their gaze. It has been said that this is the true reason for the town's near total abandonment back in the early 2000s, but of course, I want to know what you think. And finally, to finish off our list today, we have the former Williamson County Jail circa 1888. The jail was home to some of Texas's most notorious criminals, including Henry Lee Lucas, who claims to have taken the life of 35 people in the year 1982. It's a busy guy if he did it in just 1 year. The crime rate at the time was out of control, so much so that the jail became quickly overcrowded. So overcrowded, in fact, that it became incredibly easy for inmates to slip out of the prison undetected, only to continue their reign of terror on the Williamson County people. Luckily for the locals, the majority of escaped convicts were recaptured. Unlucky for the convicts, as the majority of them were sentenced to death by lethal injection, electric chair, and the old rope and tree. But you guys know by now, I can't say that word on here. The jail was abandoned in 1971, but it later reopened as county offices, and it has been told that the deceased inmates now haunt the building, throwing binders and books from shelves and lunches off of desks. It seems like they're still kind of holding a bit of a grudge against the members of state. If you're feeling a bit disappointed at the fact that no, it's technically no longer abandoned, it once was though, so that's why it's on this list, I will give you some solace in knowing that the building is actually open for public tours during the fall season, so do with that what you will.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Derek L. Frierson. The information put out by authorities regarding this case states that the crime in question took place in 2015 on a night after the suspect had been drinking at a bar in the downtown Orlando area. After having a few too many, he apparently entered his vehicle to drive out of the downtown area. Already bad for sure. The report continues on that he struck the rear of a vehicle which was stopped for a red light at the intersection of East Colonial Drive and North Mills Avenue. When he impacted, it is said that his car was traveling at 55 miles per hour, which is 88.5 kilometers per hour, and that it made no attempts to avoid the crash. This crash caused the death of one person in the vehicle that was sitting at the red light, along with another one of the passengers to become paralyzed from the waist down, while the other 3 in the vehicle all sustained other injuries as well. Derek was found to have had a blood alcohol level of 0.215 that night, which is over 2.5 times the legal limit to drive. And not only this, but he also is said to have had prior DUI convictions in Florida as well as Missouri. Unfortunately, authorities have reported that since this crash, Derek has left the Orlando area and is currently trying to evade these charges. There is an active warrant out for his arrest pertaining to multiple charges, all as a result of this accident. In our number 9 spot today, we have Harry Dana Braswell Jr. Okay, so for this one, we have to take it back in time a bit to Harry's initial arrest, which was on February 22nd, 1975. Harry was arrested for taking the life of John Robbins. Basically, a couple days before his arrest, on February 19th, Harry and 3 accomplices entered John's home, tied him to the bed, and took his life. Everyone involved in the crime was arrested at the same time as Harry, and subsequently, they were sentenced to life in prison. This obviously doesn't sound like someone who is on the loose, so what could have happened? Well, after serving 8 years of his sentence, Harry escaped. In 1983, at the Sumter Correctional Institute, Harry hid himself inside one of the cabinets that he and another inmate were loading onto a truck inside of the facility. Once the truck left the facility, he and the other inmate jumped off of the truck and voila, they had escaped. While the other inmate was later recaptured in Oregon, Harry was never able to be located and he remains at large. In our number 8 spot today, we have Joseph Obregon. Joseph has been wanted by the Tampa Police Department for the last year at least, but the crime at hand took place back on December 5th, 2017. Joseph was initially arrested after he caused a crash after allegedly racing his Dodge Ram pickup truck against another. This is of course already a crime, but things turned so much worse when, as he allegedly raced, he also crashed into an uninvolved Toyota RAV4 that was carrying 2 occupants. Because of the crash, one passenger, Bill Swartz, who is 78 years old, passed away at the scene. His wife Jane, who is 58 years old and was with him, ended up passing away at the hospital on January 20th, 2018. As a result of all of the charges brought against him, Joseph was set to appear in court on September 17th, 2021 after a plea deal was reached. Despite this seemingly initial early cooperation, Joseph failed to appear in court, after which a no-bond warrant for his arrest was issued. In our number 7 spot today, we have Alfredo Acevedo. On June 9th, 2001, Alfredo was traveling southbound on State Road 93, which is on Interstate 75 in Charlotte County, and he was driving a 1984 white Chevrolet van. According to the statement the authorities put out, while traveling in this vehicle, Alfredo had a blood alcohol content that was almost twice the legal limit. This of course led to him losing control of the vehicle, which ended up overturned. At the time of this crash, Alfredo wasn't alone in the vehicle and instead had a few passengers with him. As a result of the crash, 2 passengers in the vehicle died and 2 others sustained incapacitating injuries. Despite the clear severity of the crash as well as the horrifying injuries sustained, Alfredo is still wanted by the Florida Highway Patrol to answer for his involvement in this crash. In our number 6 spot today, we have Gaspar de Gaspar. On February 3rd, 2015, Gaspar was traveling in a 1996 yellow Thomas passenger bus when he pulled into the Marathon gas station in Indiantown. This small community was shocked that day for what transpired next. As Gaspar was backing the bus into the parking lot, there were 2 men sitting on a bench in front of the station. For reasons that no one is exactly sure of yet, the bus didn't stop and instead ended up striking both men, leaving one pinned between the station and the bus. Unfortunately, this led to the man passing away at the scene. Gaspar is said to have exited the bus after this horrific moment, but instead of sticking around, he apparently fled the scene. Others have identified him as being from the town, but no one is entirely sure where he went. There is an active arrest warrant out for him for a hit and run.
Number 5, the Blue Anchor Pub. Another bar, another haunted bill to pay. Here we go, debit or credit. Heading over to Delray Beach, the Blue Anchor Pub was built in 1840s in London, but the wooden interior was sent to New York City and then later on sent to Florida in 1996. So yeah, these spirits must be confused. They go from Jack the Ripper to some dude wearing a Yankees hat talking to a TV. Trapped in the wooden interior is the ghost of one Bertha Starkey, who was sadly killed by her husband back in the 1840s. Now, you know Bertha is lurking about when you hear rattling pots in the kitchen, and sometimes if you're really unlucky, you'll hear wailing in the middle of the night. Nice. Again, horrible sleep at this place. The Blue Anchor sounds like a really relaxing time, but every night at 10 o'clock, the current owners will blast the ship horn to scare away her spirit. I don't know, I feel like blaring a ship horn at 10 p.m. is more jarring than some pots and pans moving sometimes. You know what I mean? I'd rather hear the pots and pans than BANG in the middle of the night. No way. Number 4, the Biltmore Hotel. Another hotel to avoid at all costs. Awesome, we love these ones. First of all, do you actually like staying at a hotel? Some people love it. Some people find it super relaxing. I can't help but think about what went on in the bed before me. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, why does this part of the bed feel a little bit caved in? What's going on here? Every time I'm in a hotel, I have the worst dreams and I can't sleep at all. The Biltmore Hotel in the city of Coral Gables is also one of the most haunted hotels in Florida. You've probably heard of this at some point. It all started in 1926 during initial construction. The Biltmore witnessed a foul killing on the 13th floor. The 13th floor of all floors, my God. The Biltmore was also turned into a military hotel during World War II before ultimately being closed and then abandoned later in 1968. Now, the city renovated the hotel later on in the 80s, but it didn't take long for ghost stories to start to spread. It's horrible, horrible past, I mean, more than fair. Now, of course, the most activity is on the 13th floor, so if you do check this one out, really double down, go to the haunted floor, you know, don't just look outside and then book. Go in, stay a night. I can't believe some buildings don't have a 13th floor. Can you imagine that? Well, they do, but everyone pretends that they don't. You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, it's 12. I don't know, we'll see. Are you a 13th floor believer? Comment down below. Me personally, I don't think so, because it's the 14th or the 12th. Or the 13th, I don't know anymore. No one knows anymore. It goes 11, 12, 14. You're like, really? What's the 14's? We know what's going on here, come on. Number 3. Tampa Theater. If you're a fellow theater kid, you're also gonna love this one. Here we go. Tampa Theater opened up in 1926. The theater is now said, of course, to be haunted by a woman that was struck and killed by a carriage on the property. Imagine being hit by a carriage. It's so slow. This was actually before the theater was built, so her spirit has been there for a while. If you go to Tampa Theater today, you might catch a glimpse of that woman in a white gown walking across the mezzanine hallway. This time without carriages whipping through, hopefully, sans carriage. Imagine telling somebody in front of you to sit down during a show, then they just disappear. You're like, I think that was a ghost. I think that was probably a ghost. It says in the playbill, ghost, so maybe that was her. Tampa Theater, of course, has leaned into these claims. Now they offer Ghosts of Tampa Theater Tour, where guests can learn about its haunted history. I'd love to do this tour. I don't know, maybe I'll go to Florida. Who knows? I won't. I'm probably not going to. Number 2, Key West Cemetery. A cemetery that's haunted. Get out of town. You don't say. The Beachside Cemetery was built in 1847. Now, it was built specifically for victims of a hurricane that occurred a year prior in 1846. That's terrible. Now, this cemetery is the final resting place for roughly 80,000 to 100,000 people. So yeah, I can only assume there's a ghost or two hanging out. That's extremely tragic. Walking through a graveyard at night is scary enough anytime, but Key West Cemetery is so specific that the entire time you're walking through, you feel connected in a way. Now, me personally, I'm all set. I don't want to feel connected to an 1846 tragedy. I'm all set. I'll go the long way around the cemetery, then I'll meet you on the other side, if anything. But if you're into this kind of thing, they also offer ghost tours, so knock yourself out. There you go. Apparently, it's too scary for children, so that's a plus. Lines will be a little shorter than usual. And finally, number 1, St. Augustine Lighthouse. A scary lighthouse? How? How is that possible? The St. Augustine Lighthouse is located, of course, in Florida and was built between 1871 and 1874. And it's considered Florida's first official lighthouse ever. Imagine that. Boom, let there be light. Hey, I made you a lighthouse. Enjoy, we're all good now. There have been several tragic events over the following years, seeing as it's the first lighthouse ever. Seen a lot of history. But even during initial construction, there were several freak accidents on site. Today, said spirits are still lurking about. Sightings of shadowy figures are common, but just one time, somebody saw a hand coming through the tower door. Yeah, a floaty hand, like from Idle Hands. How terrifying is that? Can you imagine just a Smash Bros hand just lurking near you? Several guests have reported furniture also moving around on its own, which is definitely a hazard. And one person even said that they had some of their arm hairs plucked off of them while they were in the basement. Probably that floaty weird hand just doink. Give me one of those. Another guest felt someone grab their ankle at one point while walking down a hallway, which actually caused them to trip and fall down, so something's going on. I don't know what this ghost hand wants, but it's pretty chaotic to me, it seems. I think the ghost hand wants you to click like if you like this video. I think that's what it wants.
Nestled in the heart of Florida, a stretch of Interstate 4 harbors a chilling secret that might just make your GPS falter and your headlights flicker. Known as the Dead Zone, this haunted highway is steeped in ghostly tales that date back to the days when pioneer spirits roamed the land. Locals whisper about electronic blackouts and strange voices that crackle through car radios as they drive through this mysterious section of road. I don't know, I've never really heard about like a specific, I think we've done top 10 haunted roads in the past, but I don't know if we've done top 10 haunted specific sections of roads. I don't know, maybe that's an idea. The origins of the Dead Zone trace back to a tragic past involving a group of Swedish settlers who met their untimely demise due to an epidemic before the turn of the 19th century. These settlers were laid to rest right where they fell, and a local farmer later acquired the land, farming respectfully around the graves, never disturbing the final resting place of these souls. What a nice man. However, the serenity of this site was disrupted in the 1950s when the farmer's widow sold the land to the state, paving way for Interstate 4 to be constructed directly over this sacred burial site. Today, some believe that these restless spirits of the pioneers are expressing their displeasure by meddling with the very fabric of reality along this segment of the highway. It's no wonder that the area has become notorious for its spooky occurrences, from unexplained accidents to bone-chilling sounds emanating from nowhere. So next time you're driving down the I-4 and your radio starts to hiss or your dashboard lights start to dance, remember that you might just be passing through the dead zone, where the past is anything but forgotten. So that's just nice for your little road trip. You're just having snacks with your family, listening to the radio, and you're like, oh, we're driving over somebody's burial site. How sad. Pour one out.
Estero Village is home to Corishan State Park, an incredibly lovely area that is also said to be the home of some spirits. But these are particularly interesting ones. They're the ghosts of a former cult. Now, the park was the site of the Corishan Unity, a commune founded by Cyrus Teed, who proclaimed himself as the Messiah in the late 1800s. Teed and his followers settled here in 1894. When Teed died in 1908, though, his followers loaded him up into a bathtub while they awaited his resurrection. Well, weeks went by and he hadn't come back to life yet, and his decomposing corpse was getting so bad that the health department stepped in and forced them to get rid of it. But legend has it that the spirits of Teed and his devoted followers still wander the park, watching over their land. It's an absolutely beautiful spot by day, but it's said to take on a different vibe after sunset. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures walking along the trails only to vanish into thin air. Others report hearing unexplained voices echoing through the buildings. And then there are the mysterious orbs of light that have been spotted floating in the darkness.
Found in St. Augustine, Florida, and built in 1672, Castillo de San Marcos is a historic site that has switched hands from Spanish to British to American control, witnessing countless battles and echoing the tumultuous history of its time. Today, it serves as a museum, captivating tourists with not only its architectural grandeur, but also its eerie legends. Visitors often speak of sightings of fallen soldiers still patrolling the ancient walls as if guarding the fortress from long-gone enemies. Even more haunting are the tales of a tragic love triangle involving a Spanish colonel, a captain, and a woman whose spirits are said to roam the dungeons where their bodies were once found under very mysterious circumstances. This castle, with its dark past and spectral inhabitants, continues to be a beacon for those drawn to the unexplained and the supernatural.
Florida is even said to be the home of a haunted tree, often called the Devil's Tree, located in Oak Hammock Park. So back in the early 70s, a number of killings happened here, and they happened at the hands of the former sheriff's deputy of Martin County, Gerard John Schaefer. He'd buried two of his victims, Susan Place and Georgia Jessup, who he'd violated before killing, and then buried their bodies close to the tree. Now, Schaefer took the lives of at least 26 women. He'd lure them using his badge before driving them out to remote locations, usually tying them to trees before taking their lives. He was finally arrested and sentenced after two of his victims managed to escape. He was later killed in prison by a fellow inmate. Legend has it that the tree is now possessed. It's said that over the years there have been several attempts to cut down the tree, but something's always gone wrong. There are also stories about figures dressed in dark hooded cloaks performing satanic rituals near the tree at night. The stories about the Devil's Tree are so well known that in the early 90s, a local priest supposedly tried to perform an exorcism there to try and rid it of its dark energy.
Near Tampa, Florida, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge isn't just a stunning feat of engineering, it's a hotspot for creepy tales that might just give you goosebumps. Let's take it back to 1980, and amidst a foggy morning, a colossal freighter misjudges its path and slams into the bridge. The impact is catastrophic. Cars and even a Greyhound bus plunge into the icy depths below. But the eerie occurrences don't stop at this freak accident. Over the years, the bridge has become a grim sight where 200 unfortunate souls have met their end, leaping from its highest point. And if that's not enough to send a shiver down your spine, consider the whispers some have heard while crossing, or the shadowy figures seen wandering perilously close to the edge. Most unsettling of all are the tales of a phantom hitchhiker, a young woman who appears real enough to be given a ride across the bridge only to somehow vanish from the passenger seat without a trace.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have Bloody Bucket Bridge. This one comes from the town of Wauchula. There you can find an old road built over 100 years ago. To the locals it's simply known as Bloody Bucket Road. Follow that along and you'll find Bloody Bucket Bridge, which crosses a narrow waterway that locals say sometimes runs red with human blood. The story goes that after the Civil War, a freed slave and her husband settled down in the town nearby. She was elderly and took up work as a midwife. It was very tough for her because every day she was reminded of the children that were stolen away from her when she was a slave. Eventually she began to lose her mind because of this. She would suffocate and kill babies that she delivered as they were being born. She would then bury them in the river and dump buckets of blood into the water by the bridge. Everyone thought the babies were just stillborn. By the time people became suspicious and stopped using her as a midwife, it's thought she killed about 100 babies. She was exiled and spent the rest of her days as a madwoman in the Florida swamps, screaming that she was being haunted by the ghosts of the babies. She always kept a bucket next to her that was said to fill up with ghostly blood. Legend says if you go to that bridge today and wait for a full moon, you can see the water run red with blood. Stay too long though, and you may even hear screams coming from the woods. Moving on to number 9 now, we have the skunk ape. A number of southern states in the US have the legend of the skunk ape, but I think it's most prominent in Florida. Ever since the 1960s and 70s, Floridians have been reporting the sight of a giant ape-like creature stalking the Everglades. More often than not, they don't just see this creature, they also smell it. It gets the skunk part of its name from its unbearable odor, said to be like methane or rotten eggs. Physical descriptions vary, but the skunk ape is said to stand about 7 feet tall and weigh up to 450 pounds. Locals say it lives in alligator caves along with dead animal carcasses. While most scientists have discredited the idea of a giant ape running around Florida, there are many people who swear by it. These days there's even an official skunk ape research headquarters in Ochopee. Researchers collect samples and investigate reports of swamp ape sightings. At the time of recording, they've yet to find conclusive evidence and the search continues. At number 8 now, we have the killer cloud. Honestly, out of all the urban legends that I've talked about on this channel, this is perhaps one of the most unique. In the woods along the Tomoka River on Daytona Beach, a strange pink cloud has been blamed for the disappearance of dozens of people over the years. The cloud was first seen in the 1950s and 60s and is said to appear during the colder months of the year. It's rumoured to devour the flesh off human bodies. Locals have reported finding human bones in the area after the cloud has disappeared. Some say that it's swamp gas or a local fog that covers only a small area. Perhaps the creepiest explanation though is that it's the angry spirit of Chief Tomoki, who was cursed for drinking from a sacred spring. Now he devours anyone who can't outrun the pink cloud. Next at number 7 now, we have the Tallahassee Witch. In 1889, Elizabeth Budd Graham was buried in the Old City Cemetery in Tallahassee. The 23-year-old was a wife and mother whose life was not overly remarkable. Locals have always found it strange then that her tomb is perhaps the grandest in the whole cemetery. Local legend says the reason is because Elizabeth was a witch. As with Christian tradition, the other graves faced east, but Elizabeth's faces west, the exact opposite. Her gravestone has a poem by Edgar Allan Poe engraved on it which reads, "Ah, broken is the golden bowl, the spirit flown forever. Let the bell toll, a saintly soul floats on a Stygian river. Come, let the burial rite be read, the funeral song be sung, an anthem for the queenliest dead that died so young, a dirge for her, the doubly dead, in that she died so young." Now some people believe this holds clues to her being a witch. Broken in a bowl is said to refer to her killing a vampire. Doubly dead refers to witchcraft, as a witch must be killed twice to die. To this day, locals have reported modern day witches visiting her grave to pay their respects.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Uriel Aguilar. The incident involving this man is said to have taken place on June 26, 2008, when Uriel ran into another man named Pedro Trevino at the Prime supermarket in Mulberry, Florida. The men knew each other because they were co-workers, and there was a bit of a rocky history there because it is said that they had prior altercations with one another. Authorities reported that as Uriel and his brother were leaving the store, Pedro approached them and challenged Uriel to a fight. Uriel agreed to the fight, and when he went to meet Pedro in the parking lot for it, he also brought a weapon along with him. The two began fighting, and this is when Uriel used this weapon against Pedro, which ended up taking his life. After the fight, authorities claimed that Uriel fled the scene and was last seen in the area of Sparkman Road in Plant City before disappearing. Uriel still has an active warrant for this crime. In our number 4 spot today, we have Augustin Lara Nunez. Augustin is another one of those people who caused an accident and decided to flee the scene, fleeing the consequences of their own actions. On October 22nd, 2006, he was driving a 2006 silver Ford truck westbound on State Road 82. As he traveled, he encountered the scene of a prior crash that unfortunately involved a fatality. As a result of this previous crash and the investigation that needed to take place, there was a Lee County deputy who had positioned her marked patrol car facing south in the westbound lane with emergency lights activated, and a detour to avoid this accident had been set up. Like I mentioned, Augustin ended up allegedly coming across it, so it's clear that he wasn't paying attention or just flat out ignored the detour. This ended in the front of his vehicle striking the deputy's vehicle, which sadly ended in fatality for the officer. As a result of this crash, Augustin was charged with DUI involving death, and of course a felony arrest warrant was put out, but despite this, he has yet to be located and brought to justice. It is currently believed that he likely fled the country, but authorities are still on the lookout should he ever try and return to the United States. In our number 3 spot today, we have Jose Arturo Palomino. On February 28, 2009, Jose was driving south of Sample Road in Pompano Beach on I-95 southbound in a 1996 silver Mitsubishi Eclipse. During this time driving, Jose ended up striking and killing a 23-year-old woman who was standing next to her vehicle on the shoulder of the roadway. This is of course tragic, and unfortunately accidents do happen, but it's what happened next that turns this into an even bigger thing. Jose is said to have chosen to leave the scene of the crime. He fled the scene of the accident and later abandoned the car that he was in a field. Turns out that the car he was driving wasn't even his, as he took to calling the owner, explaining that it had been in an accident and that he was sorry for taking it without permission. Despite the time it's been, however, authorities have been unable to locate Jose in order to arrest him on the warrant of leaving the scene of a crash involving a death. Authorities believe it is highly possible that he has since left the country. In our number 2 spot today, we have Victor Hernandez. Victor has been on the run since 2018 as he is wanted for taking someone's life. On March 11th, 2018, it is said that Victor killed another man by the name of Luis L. Herrera Kindlin. This crime took place in Miami, and since the incident, Victor hasn't been found. In the poster about how Victor is wanted, authorities revealed that not only should he be treated as being armed and dangerous, but he also has one identifying feature about him, and that is the fact that he has a stoma in his throat. Right now, there is a reward for any tips that lead to his arrest. Right now, the Miami-Dade Florida Keys Crime Stoppers is offering a reward of up to $3,000, so if anyone has any information, they should definitely reach out to them to share, and all the tips will remain anonymous. In our number 1 spot today, we have Eric John Ritters. Eric is a wanted man and has been for quite a while now, since an incident that occurred on November 8th, 2002. Basically, that night Eric was traveling in a 1999 Oldsmobile northbound on Florida State Road 423, and he was going quite fast, definitely a lot faster than he should have been. As he sped, he allegedly lost control of the vehicle and ended up striking another car that was legally stopped. The front of Eric's car ended up hitting the driver's side door of the other vehicle, which caused significant damage, as well as very sadly led to fatal injuries for the driver, as well as the 2 other occupants of the vehicle that Eric hit. Eric was not only driving while intoxicated, but he was also going approximately 97 miles an hour at the time of the incident, despite it being a 45-mile-per-hour zone. I had to convert it to kilometers to get the full magnitude of the speed, so if you're like me, that's about 156 kilometers per hour in a 72 kilometer per hour zone. Despite these extensive injuries and the loss of life, Eric completely disappeared and still has 3 active warrants out for his arrest.
Kicking off our list at number 10, Room 206. This gives me Stephen King 1408 vibes, and I'm not sure that you're ready. Next time you visit Florida, make sure you read every customer review before you check into a hotel, because some of them might be full of ghosts. That might be a thing that you just might have to deal with. Room 206 at the Super on International Drive. Apparently, it's super haunted. Guests have reported the bed shaking in the middle of the night, probably terrible for your sleep, or freezing cold air even though the AC is turned off. And worst of all, guests have seen their bed look as though somebody was sleeping there moments before, even though it was perfectly made right before they checked in. Can ghosts squat? Is that legal? We've got a couple of spirit squatters in our room. Gotta move. Number 9, Disney on Ice. Many families love to visit Orlando at this time of year. The theme parks there are spectacular, especially Disney World. I went once when I was younger, but I don't recall ever seeing a real life Walt Disney. I don't know, maybe it has something to do with the fact that he died in 1966. Who knows? But never say never. One of Orlando's oldest tales is that Walt Disney had his body cryogenically frozen after his death. And right now, apparently it's being stored in a bunker underneath the theme park. I mean, that's a bit more creative than being cremated. I'll give him that. It's pretty Walt Disney of him just to freeze himself forever. A grad from the University of Central Florida Film School, Benjamin Lancaster, they actually made a film about this whole idea. It's called The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. That's a family classic, some would say. Number 8, Scarlett O'Hara's. You're gonna need 2 pieces of ID for this next one, alright? Perhaps the most haunted bar in Florida, located in St. Augustine, Scarlett O'Hara's is haunted by a past owner. Many believe that spirit likes to make itself known to guests. That's always fun. Try and go grab a pint and now you got a ghoul in front of you. That spirit is one of George Coley. Now George sadly bit the bullet one night when he was in his bathtub, so now we have a series of unexplainable events. Plates and glasses will sometimes move across the bar on their own, and the jukebox keeps playing Help Me Rhonda even when it's unplugged. So that's absolutely terrifying. If you want to check it out now, be warned, because it's a full-on tourist attraction at this point. But if you go, you can pose alongside the same bathtub that George Coley died in. Yeah, how lovely is that? Are we going to Disney World? Nah, even better, Scarlett O'Hara's. Yeah, you're gonna love it. Number 7, Stranahan House. You don't want to be stranded at the Stranahan House. It's gonna be bad news. Fort Lauderdale has a few haunted hidden gems, and the oldest house just happens to be the most haunted. What do you know? What odds are that? What odds are that? What are those odds? There we go. The house's OG owner was Frank Stranahan, and today, if you visit ye old stomping grounds, well, you might catch Frank in a photo or two. It's said that Frank still oversees the place, and he regularly shows up in guests' photos. So this ghost likes to photobomb. That's pretty amazing. I kind of like that. I suppose being trapped in the same house for all of eternity probably gets a little boring from time to time. Just to pop into a photo, throw some peace signs up, and then disappear back into the walls. Ivy Stranahan, Frank's late wife, she also has made an appearance or two. Nice. True love is haunting the same house forever. Guests have felt a cold hand on their shoulder, and her perfume still lingers in the hallway. Must have been some good strong stuff. Nice. Now, it's not all fun and games. Augustus Stranahan, aka Frank's father, well, his ghost likes to throw books. It's really aggressive, so heads up for that, I guess, if you go. Cheers. Number 6, the Plaza Resort and Spa. Ah yes, kick back and relax with ghosts. It's just what you want. You're never alone, I guess. That's a plus side. The Plaza Resort and Spa sounds like a relaxing getaway until you start looking up footage of the actual resort. One's gonna get your attention for sure. Back in August 2013, security cameras captured late night footage of this shape-shifting ghost, some sort of spirit, some scary blob. It's bad news, really, in any regard. What happened was the original building was destroyed by fire in 1909, and current staff will testify that they've seen the ghosts of victims caught in that blaze. How they know? I have no idea, but apparently they do know. It's a lot of details for one ghost appearance. One of the most common sightings includes a woman whose spirit is known to mess with the elevators and make items in the kitchen disappear. Okay, really? That last one's for sure an employee stealing food. He's like, oh yeah, I don't know. I think a ghost ate that cheesecake, boss. I don't know, spooky stuff, spooky.
Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Devil's Chair. Legend says that in a graveyard in Cassadaga, Florida, is a chair that belongs to the devil himself. It's a wide brick bench that was supposedly built by the devil. Every night at midnight, the devil returns to sit in this chair. It's meant only for him, and if you sit in it, he will have his revenge. Locals say that he whispers evil ideas in your ear while you're in the chair, ideas that will haunt you forever and send you down a spiral of evil doings that will result in you going to hell, where you can join him forever. Another strange addition to the legend is that if you leave a full unopened can of beer on the chair and return the next morning, the can will be empty but still unopened somehow. That's all I know. You'll just have to visit and try for yourself if you want to know more. Good luck. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Riddle House. This Edwardian house was built in Palm Beach in 1905. From the outside, it looks like nothing out of the ordinary, but its history has attracted paranormal hunters from all over the world. Its original purpose was as a funeral home, housing bodies overnight before their burial. In the 1920s, it was bought by Carl Riddle, who turned it into a home for his family. They were terrorized by spirits of the dead from years gone by. Eventually, one of the Riddle's employees hung himself in the attic room of of their house because he saw no way out of the hard times he had fallen upon. Carl wrote in his diary that after that, the energy in the house changed. Employees heard voices where no one was there. Carl removed the beam from which the man had hung himself, but the hauntings continued. The family were forced to leave. Years later, the house was taken apart brick by brick and moved to the South Florida Fairgrounds, and amazingly, people claim those ghosts went with it. They say some evil spirit still lives in the attic, attacking anyone who dares climb the ladder. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the ghost of the St. Augustine Lighthouse. Built in 1874, this lighthouse started out normal, being passed from owner to owner. That was until it came into the hands of Peter Rasmussen. His spirit is said to have imbued itself with a lighthouse. Now, he was said to be absolutely obsessed with cigars, smoking multiple ones a day. All these years on, staff report smelling cigar smoke years after Peter died. Another legend involves a pair of girls, Eliza and Mary Pitty. They were playing in the nearby waters in the late 1800s while their mother worked on the lighthouse. In a tragic accident, the girls drowned. Staff say their laughter can still be heard from the top of the lighthouse every single night. Next up at number 2 now, we have Spook Hill. In the town of Lake Wales, you can find Spook Hill. Locals will tell you that it's a must-see for anyone interested in the paranormal, although you may have already thought that based on the name. Legend says that if you stop your car on the right spot on Spook Hill and put it in neutral, you can experience your car rolling uphill. Most people are happy to just experience it, be a little bit scared and then move on. But for those of you who want to know the creepy side of things, you'll be pleased to know that there is a story meant to explain this. A nearby sign reads, "Many years ago, an Indian village on Lake Wales was plagued by raids of a huge gator. The chief, a great warrior, killed the gator in a battle that created a small lake. The chief was buried on the north side. Pioneer male riders first discovered their horses laboring downhill, thus naming it Spook Hill. When the road was paved, cars coasted uphill. Is this the gator seeking revenge, or the chief still trying to protect his land?" And finally, number 1 now, guys, we have Robert the Doll. Now, I've talked about this doll a lot on this channel, and it never gets any less creepy. In 1906, Robert Eugene Tott was given a doll as a boy in Florida. It was a gift from his nanny, who also dabbled in voodoo. The 40-inch tall doll was made of wood, stuffed with wool, and wore a sailor outfit. This is where it gets confusing. Robert gave up his name to the doll. He just gave it up and started calling himself Gene instead. Gene spoke to Robert the Doll all the time and swore the doll was real. Eventually, even neighbors began to think that they heard the doll whisper back, change its expression, or even move by itself. Some local children once claimed they saw the doll looking out of the top window of the family's home. The family began to think that their son's doll might be possessed. Yeah, I would too. No matter how much they wanted to get rid of the doll though, Gene just wouldn't let go of it. He kept this creepy doll for the rest of his life. These days, the doll sits in a glass box at the Fort East Martello Museum. Despite the glass and the years that have passed, even the sight of him creeps some people out.
What better name is there for a haunted road than Mount Misery? But wait, there's more, because Mount Misery is actually part of a set of 2 haunted highways, Mount Misery Road and Sweet Hollow Road, that neighbor one another and share in an incredibly ominous and haunted past. According to legend, a woman named Mary killed her husband and their daughters while driving down Mount Misery one night, and then, unable to live with what she had done, she took her own life while driving down Sweet Hollow Road. Many people who have driven down the roads at night have claimed to have seen a police officer flagging them down, as he would have done to Mary after she killed her family. Now, when these people get closer to the officer, they realize that the man is actually missing the back of his head. It's a gruesome sight, and at that point they drive away. Also, others claim that at one time the road was connected to the entrance of an insane asylum, which was burned to the ground one night by an angry patient, and that if you listen closely while driving down the road in the dead of night, you can still hear the dying patient's fiery screams. That sounds like hell.
And finally, we have Highway 299 in California. This one passes by a ghost town, so that, along with other ghostly tales, and it's no surprise why it's said to be one of the most haunted roads in the country. Highway 299 is a long, lonely road running from east to west through the state of California, known for its eerie ghost stories. The most haunted part is said to be between Old Shasta City and Whiskeytown Lake. Old Shasta City was, at one time, a lively gold rush town, but it's now abandoned. All that remains of it now are the ruins of the old bakery, the blacksmith shop, Mason's Lodge, and courthouse. Inside the courthouse, there is an old jail where it's said the spirits of criminals who were tried and hanged still lurk around. And further up the road is Whiskey Town. And Whiskey Town is super interesting because there's an entire town submerged under a lake. When the Whiskey Town Dam was built decades ago, the town flooded and its residents had to leave. But some believe that not everyone left, and the spirits of the people who once lived in the town now haunt the lake. And even if they're not haunting it, just swimming where there's an entire old abandoned town below you, that's weird. Built in the mid-1800s, it's named after a young woman who's said to have suffered a tragic fate on her wedding day. The story goes that Emily was left at the altar and in her heartbreak took her own life on the bridge. Ever since, strange things have been said to happen on and around it. Some claim to see the figure of a young woman in a wedding dress wandering nearby, only there's no wedding happening and it's 2 a.m. in the morning. Others will hear soft sobbing or footsteps when no one else is around. If you're looking for a blend of scenic beauty and a possible ghost encounter this Halloween, Emily's Bridge is worth checking out. Well, you don't hear about haunted zoos very often, but here we are. Yes, the Lincoln Park Zoo is rumored to be one of the most haunted spots in Chicago. Before it became a popular spot for families and animal lovers, this area was home to the Chicago City Cemetery. The cemetery was around from 1843 to 1859. It held the remains of over 35,000 people, and legend has it that as many as 12,000 bodies are still under the zoo till this day. So that kind of explains the whole haunted zoo thing. Many people have experienced eerie things here. One of the most common sightings is of a ghostly figure dressed in Victoria-era clothing. The apparition seems to appear out of nowhere, wandering through the park, right through animal enclosures, and then disappearing. Also a high probability that at least one of those sightings was just a very living person sneaking into an animal enclosure, getting eaten by a gator or something. Just one possibility. One specific ghostly woman has been frequently spotted near the Lion House, moving about as if she doesn't notice the visitors around her. She's also been seen in ladies' restrooms nearby, where her reflection has been reported in the mirror, only to disappear when someone turns to look. People have also reported flickering lights and doors slamming shut on their own. So I didn't think I'd have a zoo on a Halloween destination trip through America, but again, here we are, something different. The Queen of Mary, now permanently docked in Long Beach, California, is one of America's most famous haunted locations. In 1934, this grand ocean liner operated as a luxury cruise ship, and it was used during World War II. There are tons of stories about the strange occurrences on board. Many will say they hear unexplained noises and cold spots, but one of the most famous spirits is said to be a young girl named Jackie, who reportedly enjoys playing in the ship's pool area. Guests have claimed to hear her laughter and even catch glimpses of her apparition. Another well-known ghost is that of a crew member who died in an accident in the engine room. People have reported hearing footsteps, voices, and machinery sounds when no one else is around. So, if you want to see the place for yourself, there are guided tours that take visitors through its most haunted areas. Next up, we have Savannah, Georgia. Yes, I'm talking about the entire town. Savannah is often referred to as one of the most haunted cities in America, along with New Orleans and Salem. And it's easy to see why. The city's history is full of dark stuff. Battles, deadly diseases, disasters. You have the siege of Savannah in 1779. Then the city was captured by General Sherman during the Civil War. The spirits of soldiers who died in these battles are said to be trapped in places like the Laurel Grove Cemetery. Some will even claim to see them roaming the streets. But it's not just soldiers that haunt Savannah. The city was devastated by a series of yellow fever epidemics in the early 1800s. In 1820 alone, the disease wiped out about 1/10 of the population. That's a lot of people. There was also a deadly fire in 1820, which started in a stable and quickly spread, destroying hundreds of buildings. 1820 was just a bad year for them. But this wasn't the first time a horrible fire ravaged the city. There was a pretty devastating one in 1796 as well. The city is home to over 40 ghost tours that go deeper into all that stuff. Anyway, lots to see and do in Savannah around this time of year. The Adams Grove Presbyterian Presbyterian Church in Alabama. This historic Greek Revival style church was built in 1853. Now, it doesn't operate as a church anymore, and from what I've heard, it's on private property, so you may not actually be able to set foot in it yourself, but creepy stuff is said to go on around it. One of the supposed entities is the ghost of a former pastor, said to stand in front of the church at night with his arms raised in prayer right before big storms hit, vanishing as soon as they arrive. Many claim to see other ghostly figures wandering around the church and nearby cemetery, which is considered one of the most haunted in Alabama. Another entity people will claim to see is a shadowy figure with dark red eyes. Others report hearing the sound of crying emanating from inside the empty church, and there are also stories of ghostly organ music being heard. The Sheffield Island Lighthouse is an old Victorian-style lighthouse built in 1868. It's a short ferry ride from South Norwalk, Connecticut. Really pretty sight to check out if you're just into the history, but if you want that added Halloween vibe, even better. The story goes that the lighthouse's original keeper died mysteriously while watching passing ships through a spyglass. His sudden death is still unexplained to this day, and many believe his spirit still lingers in the building. In 1991, an archaeologist working on the island reported some strange stuff going on. He claimed to hear music coming from the shores, distant cries for help, and the sound of a foghorn, even though there was no foghorn on the island at all. Many people believe these sounds could be attributed to the ghost of Captain Robert Sheffield, the island's original owner in the early 1800s, who had a love of unusual musical instruments. The Red Onion Saloon in Skagway, Alaska was built in 1898 during the Klondike Gold Rush. Originally, it was a brothel for miners, and it was a very strange brothel. It used dolls to represent each woman working upstairs, and each day 10 dolls would be placed on the bar. Customers would then choose one to indicate which lady was occupied. When the customer returned, the doll would go back to its sitting position on the bar, signaling that the worker was once again available. The Red Onion is of course not a brothel anymore, but it still operates as a bar and a restaurant. What also remains though are those dolls, and possibly some of the workers and guests from back in the brothel days. One of the most famous spirits is named Lydia, a former madame who a number of staff have reported encountering. Apparently you can smell this lingering perfume scent in the room she used to work in, and if you're lucky enough or unlucky enough, you may even catch a glimpse of her. But Lydia is generally pretty friendly, especially towards women. She's known to water plants, caress people's faces, and leave behind also the smell of freshly cut lilacs. Guests have also snapped photos of orbs, white blurs, and even the faint outline of her face. But not all the spirits here are friendly. There's another ghost known as John. He leaves behind a scent as well, just not as nice as perfume or flowers. It's just his horrible BO. He's also known to shove people down the stairs and fling open doors while staff are busy. The Driscoll Hotel in Austin, Texas is quite the building, just elegant. It was built in 1886, and people from all over the world come here for all sorts of reasons. Tourists, obviously, weddings are hosted here, and folks interested in the paranormal. One of the most famous spirits said to haunt the Driscoll is its founder, Jesse Driscoll. Shortly after the hotel opened, Jesse ran into some financial problem. He ended up losing ownership of the hotel in a poker game just after its grand opening. But his spirit has never left. Guests have seen him throughout the hotel, but especially in a room overlooking 6th Street and Brazos. One story tells of a man who woke up in the night to find a man standing by the window smoking a cigar. When he turned on the light, the figure just vanished, but the curtains were still swaying and cigar smoke was still in the air. So Joe Ball was a serial killer. He has a couple interesting nicknames: the Butcher of Elmendorf and the Alligator Man, both of which fit. He fought in World War I, and when he returned to Texas, he started making money as a bootlegger. Then, when Prohibition ended, he opened a saloon. At the back, he built a pond where he kept 6 alligators. He'd often feed live cats and dogs to the gators, but that didn't satisfy him for long. Soon, women in the area started going missing, including his own wife. Now, in 1938, 2 county sheriffs arrived at his property to question him about several of these missing women, and Ball pulled out a pistol and took his own life. But a handyman of Joe's, Clifford Wheeler, told authorities about how he'd assisted Ball in disposing of the bodies of 2 women who he'd killed, feeding them to his alligators. It's believed Joe Ball may have taken the lives of at least 20 women.
Next up, we have a small town in Texas that was once home to a lesser known but incredibly gruesome serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas, who claims to have killed over 3,000 individuals during his criminal career, which spanned from the 1960s all the way into the 1980s. Also known as the Confession Killer or Highway Stalker, Lee Lucas was born in Blacksford, Virginia, and at a young age lost his father to hypothermia, and so his mother was forced to raise him on her own. Clearly, Henry wasn't happy with this, as his mother was the first person he killed in 1960 in Michigan. He was sent to prison but only served 10 years due to overcrowding. And that's when he moved to Ringgold, Texas with his niece Frida Powell to work for a sick woman named Katie Rich, both of whom he would later kill. While he claimed to have ended the lives of thousands of individuals through restricting airways, impaling them with sharp objects, blunt force, and hit and runs, he was convicted of only 11 killings.
Texarkana is home to one of the creepiest cases in the state's history, the Texarkana Moonlight Killer case. So this case was heavy inspiration for slasher movies that would come years later, along with tons of urban legends. The killer literally wore a sack with holes cut out for his eyes and would attack innocent couples while their cars were parked in an area called Lover's Lane. It's about as classic as it gets. So the first attack happened on February 22nd, 1946. A young couple, Jimmy Hollisand and his girlfriend Mary Jean Larry, were attacked by a man with a pillowcase over his head carrying a firearm. Jimmy was pistol whipped and very injured, and Mary was attacked, but the two lived. Many of the other victims wouldn't be so lucky though. He would attack 6 other people, and it all happened in a period of 10 weeks. The assailant became known as the Phantom of Texarkana, and the case was never solved.
Regular hospitals are bad enough, but abandoned and haunted hospitals definitely take the cake, so of course we had to include at least one on today's list. The Yorktown Memorial Hospital, located in Yorktown, Texas, between San Antonio and the Gulf Coast. It was built in 1951 to house and treat those suffering from substance abuse. When the hospital was abandoned in 1980, the living residents and staff members exited the building. But what about those who died during their time in the hospital? Well, it's said that they still inhabit the premises to this day. And no, I'm not talking about 1 or 2 patients who died while under the hospital's care. I'm talking about thousands, over 2,000 to be exact. So really, it's no wonder the place is extremely haunted. Honestly, I'm surprised it didn't open up some kind of gateway to hell and land a spot on the list in our last video. Check it out if you'd like. Those who have entered the building have reported feeling a strange rotting sensation and claim that they can feel the tormented soul's energies in the walls. Not only that, but many people have said they've heard screams and disembodied voices while inside, as well as seeing strange floating lights in the hallways, despite the fact that the building is ancient and has no electricity. If you've been, let me know your experience.
Now we move on to Kerrville, Texas, with the case of Janine Jones, a nurse who also terrorized San Antonio. What an absolute creep this woman is. Yes, she is still alive. She took the lives of an estimated 60 young patients in her care between 1970 and 1982. She'd inject patients with a variety of substances that would cause cardiac arrest. She first started working as a licensed vocational nurse at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. But hospital staff started realizing that an abnormal amount of young patients were dying in Jones's care. Now, here's where things get really infuriating. An investigation could have been carried out right there and then, and things could have ended here. But the hospital didn't want any negative attention, and they certainly did not want to be sued. So instead of alerting authorities, they asked all of their current LVNs to resign and then rehired exclusively registered nurses to take control of the pediatric ICU. This meant that Jones could just move on and start working at another hospital, which she did. So more young patients died at her hands at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville. There, a doctor finally found she'd been accessing lethal amounts of succinylmethonium chloride. So in 1985, she was finally convicted and is now serving life in prison.
Circling right on back to Yorktown, it appears as though this particular town is home to not only an incredibly haunted hospital, but also an incredibly disturbing creature known as a Wendigo. Although the creature is best described in Algonquin folklore, which is Canadian for my Americans on this channel, many locals of the town claim to have seen one of the beasts. Many people have compared the Wendigo to a skinwalker, as it is tall and lanky and somewhat humanoid, but can shapeshift and has been known to devour human flesh. And when a Wendigo finds the body of a deceased hiker, it will often inhabit it, and then turn to killing those who attempt to come into contact with its human exterior. Many people also claim to have seen the demon take the form of animals and follow and stalk them throughout the area. Stay safe out there in Wendigo.
Speaking of creepy creatures, Texas is also home to an entity known as Goatman, who stalks the old Alton Bridge connecting Denton and Copper Canyon. So the tale traces back to a black goat farmer named Oscar Washburn, who'd moved his family near the bridge. And Washburn earned a reputation as a very reliable businessman and was nicknamed the Goatman by locals. He even hung a sign on Alton Bridge pointing towards his home, proudly declaring, "This way to the Goatman." But in 1938, members of the local government who had ties to the Ku Klux Klan kidnapped Washburn from his family. They took him to the bridge, hung a noose around his neck, and threw him over the side. When they looked down expecting to see him dead though, they found the noose completely empty. Now, locals warn that crossing the bridge at night without headlights, just as the Klansmen did, will summon the Goatman. People crossing the bridge will claim to spot ghostly figures, mysterious lights coming from the woods, and even physical encounters like being touched, grabbed, or having rocks thrown at them from some unseen force. Or of course a half-man, half-goat monster.
Next up, surprise surprise, it's another creepy hospital. Worley Hospital in Pampa, Texas. The institution was opened in 1928 but closed its doors in the 1970s due to lack of revenue. After 40 years of sitting abandoned, the building has become quite a talking point for the town's locals, who claim that it is haunted by patients who died within its walls during its 42 years of operation. After many townspeople reported seeing a black silhouette in the window of the abandoned building, ghost hunters began to take interest. Those who have entered have been greeted with decrepit and decaying walls, ceilings, and floors that have been heavily vandalized. But it appears as though trespassers aren't the only ones to make their way through the empty halls of the once surgically specialized facility. Many of the patients who died within the building's walls, as well as a 25-year-old nurse who was poisoned while working at the hospital, are said to roam the grounds. People have reported seeing demonic creatures stalking them while exploring the floors of the hospitals, with the majority of the activity taking place on the 3rd floor, where surgeries would have been performed when the hospital was running. Oh, and the current owner of the grounds wants to renovate the building into a ministry. Coincidence? I do not think so.
League City, Texas is home to an area known as the Killing Fields. So there is an abnormally large list of people who have been found dead in this stretch of land surrounding Interstate Highway 45. And there are also a number of people who've gone missing from this area and have still yet to be found. And out of more than 30 cases, only a small handful have ever been solved. The place is such a hotspot for mysterious deaths that a task force, Operation HALT, was set up just to investigate these incidents alone. The first cases started cropping up in the 70s with the discovery of multiple bodies scattered throughout the area, and over the decades, law enforcement agencies have recovered the remains of numerous people, many of them young women. And it's not even clear if there's just one assailant responsible, a group, or if the area is just an ideal spot to kind of get rid of evidence. We really don't know. It's a complete mystery to this day.
And finally, we have a man with a thing for eyes. Stealing them, that is. It all started in the 1990s in a rural area of Dallas. Is it a town? Not really, but this case is pure evil, so listen up. During the 90s, SEX workers began turning up dead at an alarming rate, with one very striking thing in common. You guessed it, their eyes had been completely removed from their sockets. The killer was Charles Albright, also known as the Eyeball Killer. When he was young, Charles had quite the knack for taxidermy. He would stuff many animals a week, doing his best to make them look pristine, but there was one thing missing: eyes. His mother refused to buy glass eyes for the animals, and so instead Charles would use buttons. When he got a little older, he slept with an SEX worker, which led to him getting a transmitted infection. I feel like the pieces are starting to come together. His obsession with the eyes and his hatred for women of this certain profession grew exponentially over the years, and on December 13th of 1990 he took his first life after violating the woman when he fired a projectile from a handheld weapon, execution style, into the back of her head and carefully removed the eyes of the victim with what has been described as surgical precision. Charles was convicted of 1 killing, but most likely committed at least 3. He was sentenced to death and was executed in August of 2022.
Well, all month long we've been going inside some of the most haunted places in South Texas, and to conclude our series, we went to visit what was once called the most violent place in the Old West.
Texas has it all, from the Dallas Cowboys to country music, and even some pretty evil cities in between, so let's check those out. Starting off our list today, we have the city of Dallas, which in the late 1990s was home to the infamous eyeball killer Charles Frederick Albright, born in Amarillo in the year 1933. He grew up troubled with a knack for taxidermy and an anger towards his parents for never buying him fake eyes to use in his projects, and instead forcing him to sew buttons on his carefully curated, glorified, and gruesome stuffed animals. As he got older, Albright became interested in adult activity, and so he decided to procure the services of a professional. But she gave him an infection and he was pissed. A few years later, on December 13th of 1990, his anger turned to action. He violated and killed a working woman before carefully and completely removing her eyes from the sockets. 2 months later, another worker was discovered missing her eyes, and a month after that, a third. Eventually, a tip led police to Albright, but despite evidence found in his truck linking him to all 3 killings, he was only charged with the death of his first victim. He was sentenced to death for his crimes and was executed in August of 2020. Next up, we've got the head hacker of Houston, Texas, of course, a man or men responsible for the deaths of 5 women in Houston during 1979. The first death to occur that year was a woman found dead in her home, tied to her bed with a pillow covering her face, or at least that's what Bob Smith, who found the body, thought. Unfortunately for him and the victim, Elise Elaine Rankin, when he lifted the pillow, he quickly realized that her head had been hacked off, and signs of forced adult activity were also present on the victim. 2 weeks later, another corpse was found in the same building, just 2 floors up. Mary Michael Calcutta, who was found in her bedroom, fully clothed with her throat cut open, head intact though. That same day, Doris Lynn Threadgill was found dead inside her townhouse, her throat cut so badly that her head was almost completely separated from her body. A few months later, Joan Huffman was found dead in a local park, and on the same day, a man named Robert Sprangenberger was found inside the trunk of a white Dodge car with his head completely removed from his shoulders. Whether or not the killings were done by the same person or a group of people working together, or perhaps they had nothing to do with each other at all, remains a complete mystery to this day. Next up, we have Irving, Texas, the setting of a Taco Bell robbery gone wrong, which took place back in 1991. On January 6th of that year, 2 men, Jesse San Miguel and Jerome Green, forced their way into the local Taco Bell and then forced 4 employees into the restaurant's walk-in freezer. Miguel and Green then ransacked the establishment, emptying all the registers and shoving anything valuable they could find into bags. Initially, the 2 had agreed that neither one of them were going to cause any harm to the employees, but before they left, San Miguel had a change of heart. He returned to the walk-in freezer and asked the 4 victims to give him a good reason why he shouldn't kill them, before firing at and killing them one by one at close range. Miguel and Green then fled the scene, but they were arrested just a few hours later. Miguel was sentenced to death and executed on June 9th of 2000, and Green was sentenced to 50 years behind bars. Next up, we have Yorktown, home of the former Yorktown Memorial Hospital, where at least 2,000 people died over the years due to both physical and mental illness, gross mistreatment, self-inflicted injuries, and purposefully inflicted injuries. The hospital opened its doors in 1951. By 1990, it was completely abandoned, but it was later reopened by the city to be some kind of dark and twisted tourist attraction. Here's the thing, during the time the hospital was running, like I said, patients were grossly mistreated. In one instance, Dr. Lean Norwierski purposefully slit open a patient's throat while performing a procedure. In many other instances, patients were denied food or access to proper care for physical injuries, as well as the mental ailments that led them to becoming imprisoned in the facility in the first place. Today, the ghosts of the deceased patients are said to vengefully roam the halls of the former hospital. I don't blame them. Not only that, but the ghost of a particularly cruel nun known to torment the patients who worked on the ground is also said to inhabit the building, punishing those wearing unacceptable hospital clothes and sporting tattoos by pushing them, scratching them, or forcing them out of the building. Next up, we have Childress, Texas, which between 1988 and 1991 became infamous for a series of assumed satanic-based crimes. The first death to occur in the town was that of Tate Rowland, who was found dangling from a tree. Police ruled that Tate had taken his own life despite his friends and family insisting that there was no way that could be the case. But police suspicions did begin to rise when Tate's sister, Terry Trosper, was found dead in her bed after having choked on her own vomit after ingesting substances used to treat anxiety and major depressive disorder. Rumors had been flying around town that Tate had been a member of a local satanic cult, and one person claimed that they had even seen the young man eating a Bible. And the suspicions of his involvement in dark worship only grew after his funeral, which was attended by unknown people who were heard chanting under their breaths during the service. Soon after, a friend of Tate's deceased sister, Terry, was also found dead with a note that read, "I know something that the cops don't know. I know who killed Terry. I can't live anymore." After the new information, police re-autopsied Tate's body and found that he had ingested the same substance as Terry prior to his death. And a closer inspection of Terry revealed that she had been violated before her death. Although the police now fully believed that foul play was clearly a factor in the two deaths of the brother and sister, no arrest was ever made. But authorities did put out pamphlets outlining what to look for in cases of ritualistic killings. Next up, we've got the Lubby's Cafe killings, which took place in Killeen, Texas. On October 16th of 1991, George Hennard drove his pickup truck right through the window of Lubby's Cafeteria in Killeen, Texas before open firing on patrons of the restaurant, which resulted in the deaths of 23 people. When police arrived, he entered into a violent standoff with the officers. He fired, they fired, and Hennard became badly injured. He was instructed to stand down, but he didn't, and instead he turned the weapon on himself and took his own life. Police found a movie ticket stub for the Fisher King, and the fact that his actions closely mirrored the events of the film are what led authorities to believe that he was inspired by the film to do what he did. When Harry entered the restaurant, he screamed, "All the women of Killeen and Belton are vipers," and then he began firing at people while ranting and making snide remarks. Surprisingly, however, despite his intense hatred towards women, he was a known womanizer, he did let a mother and daughter flee the scene before beginning his spree. Next up, Mount Pleasant, Texas, of course. On May 10th of 1982, 3 Pizza Hut employees, Howard McLean, Shirley Thompson, and Greg Dwayne Landrum, were killed during a robbery gone wrong. The trio were closing up the restaurant when Calvin Paget and Max Daughtry entered the establishment demanding money. The problem was there was only $100 in the register. Paget and Daughtry became enraged and, in a fit of anger, fired a projectile at McLaughlin, fired at and beat Landrum, and fired at, beat, and impaled Thompson, all to death. When police arrived at the scene, the bodies of the deceased were found stashed away in the restaurant's storage area. Both Daughtry and Paget were eventually arrested. Daughtry received 30 years in prison for causing the death of Landrum, and Paget received 2 life sentences for causing the deaths of both Thompson and McLaughlin. Next up, we have the pure evil that took place in Austin, Texas, all the way back in the early 1880s. On December 30th of 1884, a black female houseworker was found found dead on a patch of snow in the city. She had been impaled in the stomach, chest, arms, and legs before being struck in the head with an axe. A few months later, on May 7th of 1885, another black houseworker was found dead, struck in the head with an axe. After that, Irene Cross was found dead after being impaled several times with a large blade. Her death was then followed by the death of Mary Ramey, who was violated before being impaled through the ear, and the next was Gracie Vance and Orange Washington, beaten to death. All of the women fell under the same description. They were all black and they were all houseworkers. After that, the killings did die down, but no one was ever convicted for the deaths of the women. It is believed, however, that a fellow worker, Nathan Elgin, might have committed the crime, as it was confirmed that he was in close proximity to where most of the crime scenes during the time in which the killings would have taken place. Unfortunately, investigators were never able to question Nathan, as he was killed while trying to attack a woman with a large blade. Next up, we have San Antonio, home to the angel of death, Janine Jones, who was anything but an angel. Jones was adopted at birth by a nightclub owner and a former beautician. There was not much else known about her upbringing, but what is known is that eventually she became a nurse, working at the Medical Center Hospital located in San Antonio. At one point, her coworkers described her as intelligent but coarse and prone to making loud and lewd jokes. I would assume if they were asked to describe her now, they might use harsher language. In 1983, Jones was arrested and charged with killing a young woman in her care by injecting her with a toxic amount of muscle relaxant. She was sentenced to 90 years in prison. The following year, she was given another 60 years after being charged with the attempted killing of another patient, which forced authorities to take a more in-depth look into all of the deaths that occurred in the hospital during Jones's time working as a nurse, which revealed that over 60 patients Jones had access to died between the years of 1981 and 1982. In an interview with police, Jones said that it wasn't her that killed them, but rather the voices in her head. In 2019, Jones was taken to trial, once again charged with the deaths of 5 more patients. It is likely that with new evidence coming to light each and every day, Jones will be spending the rest of her life being pinballed back and forth between both the courthouse and her prison cell. And finally, to finish us off today, we have Beaumont, Texas, where in 2010 a man named Greg Flanagan took his final breath. On September 15th of that year, Flanagan was found dead on the floor of his hotel room. At first, it appeared as though he had died of natural causes, but upon closer inspection, it was revealed that was not the case. Coroners found broken ribs, massive damage to internal organs, a small cut on his frontal private area, and a blunt force injury consistent with injuries that generally occur in the event of a high-speed car crash. But his body showed no signs of bruising. It was truly baffling. The police followed many leads, but each one soon became a dead end. It wasn't until a private investigator was brought in that the case was finally solved. Greg Flanagan was killed after a projectile fired from a handheld weapon from the next room over went through the wall and entered Greg's body through his private area. That's what caused the cut, I suppose. But by then, Greg's body had already been cremated, so no further investigation could be done in that sense. However, police managed to track down the men staying in the room next to Greg the night of his death. They caved when they were questioned, they confessed, and the case was finally solved.
We're to start the list with Waynesville, Ohio. This is said to be one of the most haunted towns in the state, which is saying a lot for Ohio. Waynesville, Ohio is founded way back in 1797, and it has quite the history and its fair share of spooky stories. So sure, folks flock here for the antiques and the annual sauerkraut festival, but it's also known as a haunt for ghost hunters. You'll hear some odd sounds in the old buildings. You'll see shadowy figures peeking out of windows. With more than 15 spots rumored to be haunted, Waynesville has no shortage of creepy tales, like the Hamel House Inn, for example. Staff here have reported seeing a mysterious man in room 4, and some say a young salesman vanished there ages ago, possibly meeting a dark end. Then there's the Stetson House, where Louisa Stetson, Lyric, supposedly still roams, dressed to the nines in old-fashioned gear. There's also the former Friends boarding home, now a museum, where you might might hear the sounds of ladies bustling about as if they're cooking up a storm, even though there's no kitchen anymore. Now we move on to Mansfield, Ohio. This place isn't just said to be haunted by, lame ghosts who will just pass right through your body if they ever try to punch you. It's also haunted by a big, scary, hairy, orange-eyed beast referred to as Orange Eyes, and you wouldn't want to get punched by Orange Eyes. But let's start with the haunted stuff. One of the most famous haunted locations in Mansfield is the Ohio State Reformatory, known for its imposing architecture and eerie atmosphere. Once a prison, the reformatory is said to be haunted by the spirits of former inmates who suffered under harsh conditions. Visitors have reported strange noises, apparitions, and unsettling feelings while exploring it. And aside from the reformatory, Mansfield is also home to, again, tales of a cryptid known as the Orange Eyes, described as a creature with glowing orange eyes and a menacing presence. Sightings of the Orange Eyes have been reported in the wooded areas surrounding the city. Some believe it to be a Bigfoot-like creature. Others think it could be paranormal in some way. Some even believe it to be extraterrestrial in origin. Next up, we have Boston Mills, aka Helltown. This is kind of like the Chernobyl of Ohio. So Helltown, Ohio, within the boundaries of Boston Township, is full, and I do mean full, of eerie legends and ghost stories. It was once a thriving community known as Boston Mills, but this area faced an abrupt evacuation in the early 70s at the hands of the US government, purportedly to establish the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Now, the empty homes, the abandoned buildings, and desolate streets that are left behind have this eerie vibe about them. You see, some locals insist that the evacuation wasn't solely because of the government's land claim. There are stories about much darker reasons. Apparently there was toxic contamination, with contaminants seeping into the soil. There are also stories about mutated animals and even people lingering around in the old abandoned homes. Not only that, but after the evacuation happened, there are said to have been satanic rituals carried out in the abandoned town. So, lots going on. Next up, we have Athens, Ohio, which has multiple haunted spots. There's a haunted abandoned asylum, a haunted cemetery, even the university is haunted. And there's more cemeteries which are also all haunted. Every place in this town has ghosts. Half the population who lives here aren't even alive. Now, the haunted reputation mostly comes from its history with the former Athens Lunatic Asylum, now known as the Ridges, which is actually part of Ohio University's campus. The asylum's grounds still have old cemeteries where former patients were buried. One of the creepiest stories about the asylum is the story of Margaret Schilling. She was a former resident who died in the attic in 1979, and she was left there for so long that her decomposing body left a stain on the floor that remains to this very day. Wilson Hall, a dorm on Ohio University's campus, is rumored to be built on top of an old cemetery. The fourth floor of Wilson Hall is said to be haunted, with reports of apparitions, strange noises, and slamming doors. There's also a rumor about a student who took their own life in one of the rooms there. In addition to the Ridges and Wilson Hall, several cemeteries in the Athens area are rumored to be haunted, including Sims, Haynes, Hanning, Cuckler, Higgins, Zion, Hunter, Slaughter, quite the name for a cemetery, Cutler, Mansfield, and Peach Ridge Cemetery. Some say these cemeteries are actually arranged in the shape of a pentagram, with Wilson Hall right at the center. Next, we have Kirtland, Ohio, which doesn't have much of a reputation of being haunted itself. What it does have, though, is a reputation for mutated creatures that are said to stalk the forests. Creatures known as melonheads. Deep within its dense forests are tales of the mysterious and eerie creatures known as the melonheads. According to local lore, the melonheads are said to be humanoid beings with these abnormally large, bulbous, hairless heads, resembling melons. I picture them kind of looking a bit like Hey Arnold, which would be a lot less cute in real life. These elusive creatures are rumored to lurk in the shadows of the forests, emerging only under cover of darkness to stalk unsuspecting travelers. Now, there are a few different versions of the melonhead's tale, but the most well-known story or explanation for these creatures was that a mad doctor was conducting unethical experiments on a bunch of orphans. Experiments which caused their bulbous craniums to take shape. At one point, the orphans got fed up with being experimented on, and they hated their melon bulbous dumb heads, and they banded together killing the mad scientist before setting his home on fire and running off into the woods. Sightings and encounters of melon heads, though, continue to be reported to this day. Cleveland is also said to have some creepy paranormal stuff going on, mostly from the supposedly haunted Franklin Castle, which is said to be Ohio's most haunted house. The Franklin Castle is a towering structure with a dark and mysterious past. Built in the late 19th century, Franklin Castle has long been rumored to be haunted by restless spirits. Stories of tragedy, death, and mystery surround it. Legend has it that the castle's original owner, Haynes Tideman, suffered multiple personal losses within its walls, leading to rumors of curses and supernatural stuff going on. Pretty soon after his family moved in, Tideman's mother died. His sister then died of diabetes, and over the next 3 years, more and more of his siblings died prematurely. Only 2 of the 6 actually made it to adulthood, so it's really no wonder why the place is said to have some darkness lingering in it. Over the years, visitors and residents have reported strange sounds, apparitions, and unexplained phenomena within the castle. Despite renovations and changes in ownership, one thing has always stayed the same: the paranormal activity. Next up on the list is Put-in Bay. Now, Put-in Bay, Ohio may be known for its sunny shores and summer fun, but lurking beneath the surface, there's some creepy stuff going on. From what I've read, there are 3 major haunted hotspots. First up, we have the Park Hotel. This hotel has stood since the late 1800s, and it's seen its fair share of guests come and go. Also means there's a lot of history, some of it dark. Some visitors have reported more than just creaky floorboards and old-fashioned charm. Rumor has it that the Park Hotel is haunted by the ghost of a young woman who tragically fell to her death from one of the upper floors. Guests have reported strange noises, flickering lights, and even sightings of a figure wandering the halls late at night. Next, there's the Dollar House, a Victorian mansion. Legend has it that the original owner, Valentine Dollar, was involved in some shady dealings during Prohibition, including smuggling alcohol and hiding it in secret passages throughout the house. And today, visitors claim to hear whispers and footsteps echoing through the empty rooms, as if the ghosts of Dollar's past are still lingering within the walls. Then there's the Crow's Nest, a historic home that sits on a cliff overlooking Lake Erie. This mansion was once owned by Jay Cook, a banker and financier, but there's a tragic tale of one of Cook's daughters that's left its mark on the property. The story goes that the young girl fell to her death from one of the windows, and her ghost is said to still haunt the grounds, appearing as a fleeting figure in white. Moving on to Marietta, Ohio next, a charming town that also has its fair share of ghost stories, and most of the scary stuff happens at Hotel Lafayette. This hotel was built in the late 1800s. Over the years, guests and staff reported strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena while staying there, leading many to believe that the hotel is haunted by spirits. One of the most famous ghostly residents of the Hotel Lafayette is said to be a woman named Sarah, who reportedly took her own life in one of the rooms, and guests have reported hearing disembodied cries, footsteps, and even seeing apparitions wandering the halls late at night. Others have claimed to feel an eerie presence or sudden drops in temperature, but Sarah isn't the only ghost rumored to haunt the Hotel Lafayette. Some guests have reported encountering the spirit of a young girl who plays tricks on unsuspecting visitors by moving objects or flickering lights. A real brat of a ghost. But at least she's still having fun in the afterlife, so props to her. Next up, we have another kind of Chernobyl-like Ohio small town, Cheshire. Only a handful of people still call this place home. At one time, this was a bustling town, but barely anyone lives there at this point, and that's because of the environmental hazards caused by a nearby power plant. The plant emitted a thick, sooty residue and chemical fogs that would blanket the town sporadically. Obviously, not at all safe for residents to live in that kind of condition, so many abandoned their homes and started new lives in other places. Eventually, the power company responsible for the pollution was compelled to just buy out the entire town. But finally, we have the abandoned town of Moonville. Love that name, Moonville. This is a ghost town with only a few traces left behind: a cemetery, some foundations, and a desolate railroad tunnel. But what sets Moonville apart are the chilling tales that surround its abandoned tunnel. Stories that have been passed down for decades. One of the most famous famous specters haunting Moonville is that of Theodore Lawhead, the unfortunate engineer whose spirit is said to roam the tracks. Back in the 1880s, Lawhead met a tragic end when his train collided head-on with another. Now visitors report sightings of a ghostly figure with a lantern in his hand pacing along the track and disappearing into the tunnel. Then there's the story of the Brakeman, a ghost believed to be that of a young man who met his demise after a night of heavy drinking. Legend has it that he fell asleep on the tracks, never to awaken again because he was too sauced to wake up before a train ran him over. Then there's the Lavender Lady. Some say they've seen a frail elderly woman walking near the tunnel only for her to vanish into thin air, leaving behind the lingering sense of lavender. Some say she's the spirit of Mary Shea or Shay, who met her end on those very tracks. There's also the spirit known as the Bully, believed to be the restless spirit of Baldy Keaton, a Moonville resident who liked a good old fist fight. The tale goes that after a scuffle at the saloon, Baldy was found dead on the tracks. As for how he died, no one knows for sure, but now his ghost is said to loom above the tunnel, glaring at unsuspecting visitors and even pelting them with stones. Loveland is home to one of the strangest creatures said to stalk the state, the Loveland Frog. But it's also home to a supposedly haunted castle. Loveland Castle was constructed by Harry Andrews. A very interesting man this guy was. He had a lot of interest in knights and medieval lore. Andrews was born in 1890. He worked as a medic during World War I. He then contracted meningitis during the war and was believed to be dead. His body was actually moved to the morgue, like he was done. But when his body was taken back to the hospital to be dissected, the doctors were like, hey, you know what, why not? Let's just see if we can get his heart beating again with adrenaline. Miraculously, it worked. Andrews, who'd now spent a whole bunch of time in Europe and then almost died, was now even more into medieval history and returned home with this newfound determination to build his very own castle. Eventually, he constructed Loveland Castle along the banks of the Little Miami River. Andrews then moved into the castle, where he lived until he died in 1981. Today, the castle is the headquarters for the Knights of the Golden Trail, an organization Andrews started, dedicated to upholding the principles of knighthood, but Harry Andrews' spirit is said to still roam the castle grounds. Objects will mysteriously disappear or move, and voices are heard echoing through the corridors. And as I said at the top, of course, Loveland's supernatural reputation doesn't end with this castle. One of the most famous legends is that of the Loveland Frog, or frogs. There have been multiple large frog-like creatures spotted near the Little Miami River over the years. Next up, we have Ashtabula, which is said to be haunted by the spirits of a tragic train disaster. So on December 29, 1876, the Pacific Express No. 5 crossed the Ashtabula Bridge. But because of particularly cold weather and structural weaknesses, the bridge collapsed, sending the train plummeting into the icy river below, and in the end, 98 people died. The scene must have been absolutely horrific, with rail cars crashing into each other and igniting in flame, and firefighters were unable to put out the flames, so people just cried out in pain and horror as they were consumed by fire, trapped in the wreckage. It was one of the worst rail accidents in US history, and the screams of those victims still haunt the area to this day. Some say you can occasionally hear them above the rush of the river. The Chestnut Grove Cemetery holds the remains of 19 of these victims, but their spirits are said to be very much active. Visitors to the cemetery have reported seeing ghostly apparitions. But along with the victims of the tragedy, there's also said to be the ghost of Charles Collins, one of the developers of the bridge. Witnesses claim to have seen his guilty spirit weeping at the sight of the tragedy or crying over people's graves. Some claim to see tiny lights even hovering below the new bridge where the old one once stood. Rogues Hollow near Doylestown, Ohio has its fair share of spooky tales as well. It's said that a mill worker died in a pretty gruesome manner, getting crushed by the mill wheel, and now his spirit is said to guard the area, keeping outsiders at bay. Then there's the eerie tale of the Headless Horse. and the ghost oak tree. So at one time there was a large oak tree near Route 65, and one of its branches hung so low that riders on horseback had to duck as they passed under it. Well, one story goes that the branch was weighed down extra low with ice, and a poor horse just ran into it at top speed, lobbing off its head. From that point on, riders passing the area late at night would occasionally come across a devilish figure riding a ghostly headless horse. Next up we have Oxford, Ohio, which has one of the coolest ghosts, a phantom motorcyclist. So the story goes that back in the 40s there was this farmer's daughter. She was head over heels for this guy who was a bit of a James Dean type, leather jacket, motorcycle, very rebellious. Also a lot like me, minus the motorcycle, the leather jacket, and the rebellious part. His name was James, that's the similarity. And her father was not too thrilled about their relationship. He thought the guy was trouble, and he probably wasn't wrong. He forbade his daughter from seeing him. So to avoid her father's disapproval, they met up in complete secret, usually late at night when the coast was clear. And when it was, the girlfriend would flash the porch light 3 times as a signal for him to come over. Well, one night, the boyfriend decided he wanted to take their relationship to the next level and propose. He saw the 3 flashes and revved up his motorcycle, racing towards her house to pop the question, but as soon as he sped down the road, he lost control of his bike, crashing into a barbed wire fence. And ever since, people claim they've seen this mysterious light flickering in the distance along the road where he crashed, said to be the spirit of the phantom motorcyclist, still trying to reach his girl's house to ask for her hand in marriage. Next on the list is Chillicothe, where there were a series of mysterious disappearances between 2014 and 2015. Now, it all began in the spring of 2014 when Charlotte Trago vanished without a trace. Trago, who had struggled with addiction, was a mother of 2, and she remains missing to this day. Shortly after Trago's disappearance, another woman, Tamika Lynch, who was a friend of Trago's, went missing as well. Her body was discovered 3 weeks later by kayakers. It's pretty obvious there was foul play, but the official cause of her death was deemed inconclusive. Then there was the disappearance of Wanda Lemons in November of 2014. She's also never been found. On Christmas Day 2014, Shasta Hemmelrich went missing. Her body was later recovered from the Scioto River. Authorities claim she took her own life, but her family, as well as many others, think someone took it from her. Then there was the disappearance and discovery of Tiffany Sayers' body in May 2015. Her remains were found in a creek, covered by a sheet. And the final victim, Timberly Claytora's body, was found near an abandoned building. She died at the hands of a firearm. And the case just would have been handled completely differently if these women hadn't been battling addiction. That was the one thing connecting all these. They were all involved in that world. And there's just this kind of lax attitude when it comes to situations like this, unfortunately, where authorities are like, well, you know, they're part of that world. This is just what happens. So it really hasn't got the attention that it deserves. Now we move on to the town of Lancaster. Here, there used to be a home with an incredibly dark past, the Mudhouse Mansion. So the mansion's origins go back to the mid-19th century when it was built as a grand estate for a wealthy family. But as time went on, the home fell into disrepair and eventually it was abandoned and left to decay. And over the years, all these urban legends started to form around it. One of the most infamous stories is that the family had actually died in the mansion. Some versions of the tale claim that they were killed by an unknown assailant. Others go that they'd been driven to madness by some sinister force lurking within the mansion's walls. The Mudhouse Mansion was even said to be the birthplace of Bloody Mary herself. The mansion was demolished in 2015, but some folks will still claim to see ghostly figures of the mansion's former residents wandering the grounds, forever trapped in a limbo between the worlds of the living and the dead. Alright, one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in Ohio has to be the Circleville Letters case. Now I'm going to paraphrase here because there's a lot of detail. We could probably do an entire video about this case alone. but I'll go over it. It all started in 1976. Residents of Circleville started receiving these unsettling, threatening letters containing all these intimate details of their personal lives. The letters were postmarked from Columbus, Ohio, but there was no return address. One of the receivers of these letters was Mary Gillespie, a bus driver. She was accused in one of these letters of having an affair with the school superintendent, and the letters just kept coming in from this unknown sender. Then, Mary's husband, Ron, also became a target. He received a chilling ultimatum to end his wife's supposed affair or face dire consequences: death. Ron was found dead in his pickup truck after a mysterious phone call which had seemingly confirmed his suspicion about the letter writer's identity. He'd left in his pickup truck with a firearm but was found dead soon after, having crashed into a tree. Now, authorities ruled Ron's death an accident, but then the letters continued. A number of residents received letters saying that Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe, who had investigated Ron's death, had been involved in a cover-up. At one point, this mysterious writer even planted threatening signs along Mary Gillespie's bus route, one of which she went to take down, only to find out it'd been booby-trapped. If Mary had pulled the sign down in a particular way, a small pistol would have fired at her. Now, one man was arrested, Paul Freshore, but it's never been 100% verified that he was behind these letters. Eventually, he got out on parole. Case is still a mystery to this day. In the Hills and Dales Metro Park in Kittering, Ohio, there's a structure with a very shadowy past: the Haunted Witch's Tower, also known as Frankenstein's Castle. It was completed in 1941, and this 30-foot tall tower was constructed by boys with the National Youth Administration using salvaged stone. Its purpose was to provide panoramic views of the community country club, with its lookout platform offering vistas stretching up to 15 miles. But because of how remote the tower is, a lot of young hooligans started flocking there in the 60s. Graffiti covered its walls, and bottles of liquor and beer cans littered the grounds. Even shingles torn from the roof and glass bottles became ammo for attacks on passing cars below on Peterson Boulevard. Then in 1967, during a thunderstorm, a young woman named Peggy Harmison sought shelter inside the tower with her boyfriend, Ronnie Stevens. Bad move. Lightning struck the tower, killing Peggy instantly. Her body was found on the 11th step, half covered in severe burns. Ronnie survived, but he was found in a state of uncontrollable shock, apparently running around screaming. And ever since that night, there have been stories about the ghost of Peggy haunting the tower. Alright, let's switch things up with a haunted golf club. You don't hear about haunted golf clubs very often. Legend has it that in the 60s, a bride fell from a balcony at Oakhurst Golf Club in Grove City, Ohio, and her ghost is said to haunt the establishment to this very day. One of the most frequently reported sightings involves the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in white, believed to be the ghost of the bride. The upstairs kitchen, located near the ballroom where events are held, is said to be a hotspot for paranormal activity. Employees have reported hearing unexplained sounds of pots and pans clanging and knocking late at night, only to discover that items have been mysteriously rearranged by morning. Alright, we're finishing things off today with Minerva. It all began in August of 1978 when the Caton family reported encountering a strange creature near their home. According to the Catons, they were enjoying a quiet evening when they heard unusual noises coming from outside. They came face to face with this towering ape-like creature standing over 7 feet tall. The creature reportedly had shaggy dark fur covering its body, it had glowing red eyes, and emitted this foul odor. The Catons quickly ran back to the safety of their home and phoned the cops. In the days that followed, all these other sightings of a mysterious creature were reported by other residents of Minerva. Witnesses described similar encounters with a large, hairy beast lurking in the shadows, but none of the stories were scarier than the Catons, who said the creature returned to their property several times, hurling rocks at their home, staring at them through their kitchen window, and even killing their dog. It's one of the most violent Bigfoot cases ever reported. We're starting things off with Miamisburg in Montgomery County, which has some pretty spooky spots, including an Arby's. All kinds of disturbing stuff is said to go on at this fast food joint. Employees closing up for the night alone have said they've heard laughter coming from the basement, only to find no one there. Some will also report having their hair pulled by some unseen force. There's also a ghostly man who sometimes is seen staring into the oven during opening or closing hours. Grove Cemetery is probably the most well-renowned haunted hotspot in this town, though some visitors will say they see a young girl crying over a grave, but when approached, she'll just stare at you for a moment before vanishing into thin air. There's also the grave of a preacher's daughter who took her own life after being disowned by her family. A Bible was said to have sat on her grave, with stories of it appearing broken one instant, but then perfectly fine the next. Next up is East Liverpool, which is home to a couple haunted parks, a haunted cemetery, and of course, a haunted phone booth. As silly as a haunted phone booth might sound though, the story is actually pretty spooky. So apparently a young man was killed in the area and his ghost haunts the street that he died on. And some will say that on some nights, especially Saturdays during the month of March, passersby will hear ringing coming from the booth. And if you answer the phone, you might just hear a somber, ghostly voice on the other end telling you to look across the street. And if you do, you just might see a headless young man waving before vanishing into the shadows. Now we move on to Sandusky, Ohio, which has a few notoriously haunted spots. One is the Sandusky County Historic Jail and Dungeon. This place, which was built in the 1840s, is no longer a jail or a dungeon, or I guess it technically is a dungeon and a jail, but it's just not operating as one. There are tours of the place though, and the staff and many people who visit claim to have experienced some pretty eerie stuff. Something that's said to happen every so often has to do with the courthouse security system. So sometimes at around 2 or 3 in the morning, the motion alarm just goes off, detecting someone or something outside the dungeon door. Whatever it is will then make its way up the steps to the first floor of the courthouse. Now I say whatever it is because when security cameras get checked, there's usually no one in the footage. But on rare nights, there is a shadowy figure with a brimmed hat seen spotted sitting on a bench outside the courthouse. The fire alarm has also been known to be pulled even when nobody's near it. Whatever spirits are haunting this place, they seem to really enjoy loud, obnoxious noises. And on top of all that, you also have your typical disembodied sounds like voices and footsteps when there's nobody else around. We're going to stay in Sandusky for a bit though and talk about Cedar Point. Cedar Point is one of the most popular amusement parks in the US, but it also has a bit of a dark side. When we think of haunted theme parks, it's usually the abandoned ones where we picture all the paranormal stuff going on, but Cedar Point is still very much open. It was built in 1870 though, so it's been around for a while, and any theme park that old has definitely had its fair share of horrific accidents. Get it? It was a fair share theme park. Alright, one of the most haunted attractions was the Frontier Town Carousel, which is no longer there, but people would often claim to catch a glimpse of a ghostly woman riding one of the horses. She's said to be the wife of the man who carved the horses on the carousel. He'd killed her after finding out that she was cheating on him with a jockey, so now her spirit is attached to the carousel, coming out at midnight to ride a fake horse every full moon, which she's probably not too plussed about. For a woman who really seemed to like being around horses, a wooden one probably just doesn't cut it. Not to mention that she's stuck on a pretty boring ride that was built by the dude who shot her to death. So there's also that. Next on the list we have the town of Worcester. You thought the haunted Arby's was intriguing? Try the haunted Pizza Hut in this town. Yeah, you can't even grab a slice of pizza in Ohio without something paranormal or weird happening. I'd love to do a road trip through Ohio visiting every haunted fast food restaurant actually. You could call it like Fast Frights Ohio tour or something. So this Pizza Hut is part of a big plaza that was all built over the grounds of a former insane asylum. So there could be some lingering spirits in the area, most of whom seem to really stick to the Pizza Hut. There's also a Taco Bell in the plaza, which some paranormal stuff is said to go on, but there's not as many stories about that place because there's probably like 5 people who goes to Taco Bell, especially when you have a Pizza Hut right there. I'm gonna get tons of comments now from like Taco Bell fans being like, Taco Bell's the best. I don't know. I just think it's kind of mediocre. Staff at the Pizza Hut, though, have seen figures vanish into the walls. One manager who was closing up for the night was startled to hear footsteps following her and then turned around to see nothing but a white mist hovering in the air. Marietta in Washington County. This town is probably most well known for Anchorage Mansion, which is said to be very haunted. It was built by Douglas Putnam for his wife Eliza in the 1800s, but it's said Eliza died shortly after moving in, and people claim to have seen her ghost wandering around or peeking out of windows. Later on, the mansion was turned into a nursing home, where residents also reported seeing Eliza's ghost. Some say there are secret tunnels under the mansion as well, maybe from the Underground Railroad, but nobody really knows if they're haunted as well. But it's Ohio, so I'm presuming they are. Marietta is also home to a haunted Comfort Inn, where the televisions are known to turn off and on by themselves, doors open and close on their own, and guests will occasionally wake up with the feeling of cold hands on their body, luckily to find that no one is there in the room with them. I'd rather have a ghost in my room than a chilly intruder. Again, in Washington County, we have the village of Fredericksburg, which is home to Robin Industries, which does custom molding for rubber and plastic components. It was formerly the Fredericksburg pottery site, which had a pretty dark past, and the building is rumored to be haunted by multiple spirits. There were 2 major tragic events at Fredericksburg pottery site, including 2 devastating fires and a fatal train accident that took the lives of 12 people. So employees at the site have reported some pretty eerie encounters, like feeling sudden cold spots. Now, I usually kind of roll my eyes when people say cold spots. It's like, all right, spot's cold, whatever. But these are extra strange because staff will report feeling them behind machinery that runs at extremely high temperatures. One story involves the ghost of a man blamed for the train derailment, who is said to show up in the mold room. In the shipping room, sightings of an older gentleman believed to be the former mayor who witnessed the tragic train accident have also been reported. Then there's the apparition of an elderly woman who's been seen swinging doors open and shutting off machinery. The stairwell leading to the office is said to be guarded also by a spirit, with one employee experiencing a strong stench and then a sudden gust of wind that nearly knocked her down the stairs. And unless someone was eating some bad burritos from Taco Bell that day, I think it might have been a ghost. So I know we've covered Dayton, Ohio already, but I didn't mention the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is said to be one of the most haunted spots in the state. It's even been featured on Ghost Hunters. One eerie story involves the ghost of a young Vietnamese boy believed to have perished in one of the museum's helicopters. Visitors have reported sightings of the boy wandering the museum grounds after dark. And of course, then they go up to talk to him, and he's not actually there. It's not just some kid who ran into the place. There's also a German World War II fighter plane said to be inhabited by the ghost of its pilot. Visitors claim to have seen the pilot waving from the plane's window. Seeing as it's the ghost of a German World War II fighter pilot, though, I'm not sure if what he's doing is actually a wave. The helicopter named Hopalong is said to be haunted by a pilot who met a tragic end, with staff reporting sightings of him desperately flipping switches in a futile attempt to escape. The Black Maria, known for its secret missions during the Vietnam War, is also said to be haunted by the spirits of soldiers who died on board. The boxcar plane, famous for dropping the atomic bomb on Nagasaki, is also rumored to be haunted by a young boy who is said to dart past it during the night. Haunted inns, always a staple of small villages, and Granville in Licking County, Ohio, has one of its very own, the Buxton Inn. This place dates back all the way to 1812, so plenty of history with this place. Even Abraham Lincoln stayed here, and some of those who were escaping from the Underground Railroad stayed here at one time as well. So with all the people who have passed through the doors and slept under this roof, all the history surrounding the building, it probably comes as no shock that some energy is said to linger within the inn. Not only do you have the spirits of past guests who have long since passed, but even former deceased employees are said to have never fully left. Like one of the previous owners, Ethel Bonnie Houston, for example, who's become known as the Lady in Blue. Several guests have claimed to see a woman in a blue dress roaming the hallways, only to walk right through closed doors or just vanish into thin air altogether. Some have also smelt cigar smoke out of nowhere before spotting a man who also vanishes into thin air. This is said to be the ghost of the inn's founder, Major Buxton. And we're to finish things off with Loudonville in Ashland County. This place is known for its two supposedly haunted spots, one of which is a hotel, the other a park. First, there's Mohican State Park, which is said to be haunted for a couple different reasons. Mainly though, there used to be an asylum on the land in the 1800s, which might help explain some of the ghostly stuff going on. Witnesses have also reported seeing a mysterious light in the park for over 2 decades. Then there's Landell's Mohican Castle, which is actually a hotel, and a damn cool looking one too. Looks like something you'd see in Norway. It was built on the grounds of a former English/German church. The story goes that in the late 1800s, a dispute over language during worship services led to the church mysteriously burning down after the Germans decided to relocate their relatives' graves. Since the current owners acquired the property in 1991, a series of unexplained fires have just been plaguing the place, including the destruction of a book factory in 92 and an on-site restaurant in 2007. Some believe the land is just cursed, with guests reporting sightings of a girl in blue in the graveyard and hearing crying in the cemetery and pool building. People will also claim to see Civil War era soldiers in their rooms.
Number 10. White Rock Lake. White Rock Lake is an area that is filled with many legends. It's home to the ghost of the Lady of the Lake. Years ago, a young couple was driving home from a party along the lake late one night. The two were tired and ready to go home when the wife suddenly screamed at her husband to stop the car. A young woman in a long white gown had appeared in the road before them. The couple asked the woman if she needed a ride and she accepted. They drove on, and all while the wife could hear the steady drip, drip, drip of water. But once they reached the address the woman had given them, they turned around to find her gone, leaving behind only a puddle. Confused, the couple got out at the address and knocked on the door. An elderly man answered. They told the man about the young woman they had just picked up, and he sighed and told them they were not the first couple to come knocking on his door late at night. The woman they had picked up was his daughter, who had drowned in White Rock Lake 10 years earlier. The Lady of the Lake has been spotted and even picked up many times since, and continues to haunt White Rock Lake in her white gown, looking for a way back home, and this is just sad. Number 9. Adolphus Hotel. The Adolphus Hotel was built on the former site of Dallas's original city hall in 1912, and the hotel has a reputation as one of the city's most prominent historical landmarks. In addition to being the oldest hotel in the city, it's no surprise it's also among the most haunted. One of the most famous spirits here is an apparition who appears in a 1930s era white wedding gown, the spirit of a jilted bride who was supposed to have been married in one of the hotel's glamorous ballrooms on the 19th floor, but ended up taking her own life at the hotel instead when her groom left her at the altar. Ever since that night, guests staying on the 19th floor report hearing a woman crying, footsteps running up and down the hall, and even the sound of rope creaking under the strain of a body. The bride spirit has been spotted wandering the halls after events and parties, still wearing her white dress and veil. Again, this is just incredibly sad. Staff and guests of the hotel also report an eerie feeling of being watched or of a presence in the room with them. Now, not all ghost residents have sad backstories, as many are believed to be former guests who checked in again during the afterlife because they had such a good time in the hotel back in their days among the living. Guess it's a cool place to be in life and death. Number 8. The Coombs Creek Trail. Located in Oak Cliff, this trail offers a serene, scenic path along Coombs Creek for nature lovers to enjoy, enjoy, but everything is not as it seems, as this trail has an eerie history. Years ago, a young girl named Mary would ride her bike every day along the trail, but one day Mary never returned home. It's still unknown whether Mary drowned in the creek, was struck by a passing train, or was taken, but she seems to have disappeared without a trace. Hikers still report seeing the figure of a young girl riding her bike dangerously close to the edge of the water, but when they call out to warn her, she vanishes into thin air. Others have reported seeing a small ghostly face of a young girl peeking at them from behind a tree. When they try to move closer to investigate, the face disappears. Then the face reappears further along the trail, inviting the hiker to follow her deeper and deeper into the woods. And if a ghost child is trying to get me to go deeper in the woods, I'm just gonna turn around and leave. Number 7. The Majestic Theater. The Majestic Theater is located on Elm Street in downtown Dallas. Elm Street? No, I've seen that movie before. Now, in the 1910s, it housed live vaudevillian performances before transitioning to screening films in 1922. The Majestic remained in business until the 1970s, and then its doors were reopened for live performances in 1983 after it landed on the National Register of Historic Places. Some say the theater's original owner, Carl Hopitzel, still haunts the building, making sure things run according to his liking. One former employee claims he shared an office space with Carl during his time there. He reports that one of his responsibilities each night was to ensure that the door in his office leading to the theater was locked, but each morning when he showed up for work, the door was wide open, and a strange chill would permeate from the room. When he mentioned this to his manager, he laughed and explained that this was only Carl, who liked to use the door to get into the theater and check up on things. Weird smells, stage props inexplicably moving, and a light hanging above the balcony illuminating on its own have all been attributed to Carl. His spirit is rumored to linger there to this day, making sure his theater runs smoothly and maybe catching a show or two. Number 6. Snuffers Restaurant on Greenville Avenue. Snuffers is a popular local chain that serves classic American food, or at least that's what it says when I Google it. But the location on Greenville Avenue serves up a lot more than just burgers. Customers and staff of the Dallas restaurant claim that the place is seriously haunted. Before Snuffers, there was an Easy Parlor. It seems that a man was badly injured after hours when a fight broke out at an employee party. He then stumbled into the bathroom where he drew his final breaths. Years later, once Easy Parlor became Snuffers, the managers would sit at a table by the bathrooms each night to finish up closing paperwork. As they sat in the dark, near empty restaurant, they would listen as antagonized, stumbling footsteps made their way to the bathroom, then watch as the door creaked open by itself and never shut. In 2013, the original building was demolished and reconstructed, but reports of strange happenings didn't stop. Other employees have since reported feeling cold gusts of wind rush by them and doors slamming shut all on their own. Sounds like a dinner and a show to me. Number 5. Flagpole Hill. Just adjacent to White Rock Lake is a road leading to the infamous Flagpole Hill, the rumored location of a band of rock-hurdling poltergeists. Yep, you heard that right, they just throw rocks at you. Passerbys report driving through the area late at night only to be pelted by a rain of pebbles. When they got out of the car to chase down the culprits, there were none to be found. Local legend identifies the ghost as 3 restless spirits tangled in the dark history of the area. According to the story, a construction worker ended their own life in the house on Flagpole Hill before its completion, and a hired hitman was later convicted of taking out the couple who occupied it. Now, don't think just because you're not in a car, you're safe. Those walking on foot rather than driving past seem to be just as unlucky. Hikers and other residents of the area have reported an unseen assailant pelting them with rocks as they pass by. Sounds like this place really rocks. Get it? Because so funny. Number 3. Sons of Herman Hall. Herman Hall's website marks itself as the oldest freestanding wood structure in Dallas, as well as the oldest bar. And for over 100 years, the hall has held concerts, parties, and dances. So no wonder the dead come back there to party. Both staff members and guests of the hall have reported strange occurrences, especially in late hours of the night. Some guests have seen paintings fly off the wall as thrown by some unseen force. Others have heard footsteps in the hallways and seen doors suddenly slam shut. Guests also claim to hear children laughing, even when no children were present, which is just creepy. Longtime staff members of Herman Hall report sensing a lingering presence and seeing flashes of light and shadow. One particular staff member recounts a time he and some other employees saw a couple dressed in Victorian-era clothing walk past them and go upstairs, but about 30 minutes later, when the couple hadn't returned, the staff went upstairs to find all the doors locked and no one inside them. I just think these ghosts want to return to their party days though. Number 2. Goatman's Bridge. Goatman's Bridge, more formally known as the Old Alton Bridge in Argyll. Dating back to the 1930s, locals have told tales of the specter of a strange half-man, half-goat creature lurking beneath the bridge. The Goatman is said to stand over 7 feet tall with big horns and glowing red eyes, which to me just sounds like the devil, but I mean hey, Goatman is a cool name. Some believe the Goatman remains dormant for years at a time and awakes only to hunt for prey. Now the Goatman isn't the only spirit on this bridge, as to keep him company is another spirit, that of a young mother crying out eternally for her lost child. Residents making their way over the bridge late at night have reported hearing her ghostly wails. Some say the two ghosts are connected and that years ago the Goatman stole the young woman's baby. When she found out, she threw herself from the bridge and her spirit has haunted it ever since. Now I already don't like bridges because of heights and being over bodies of water, but being on a haunted bridge, no thank you. And coming in at number 1 is Miss Molly's Hotel. Located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Miss Molly's Hotel is a little deceiving. In the lawless pioneer days of the Old West, Miss Molly's operated as a bordello, making working girls and their customers among the most common apparitions to appear here. One such customer even has a room named after him, the Cowboy Room, where he has been frequently spotted by guests and staff of the hotel. His name is Jake the Cowboy, and when Paula Goins became manager of Miss Molly's, she had no clue that it was haunted. After months, she reported that strange things started happening and she eventually saw Jake herself. She said, "I saw him in full body. He walked into a room and shut the door behind him, and I went up and knocked on the door and opened the door and no one was there. That is when I knew that something was up, because I'm sitting there thinking, I know I'm not crazy." Another ghost there is assumed to be a former madame by the name of Josie King. Some suspect that she oversaw the house during its bordello days. Josie is seen a lot, usually at 3 a.m. at the foot of the bed, and allegedly Josie likes to watch people sleep. No thanks. Guests can also look at the hotel's collection of creepy photographs or listen to eerie audio recordings captured through the years. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, Missouri. Legend persists that once you step through the doors of Lemp Mansion, you're stepping into a swirl of bad luck that just won't let go. This sprawling brick home belonged to a prominent family whose lives took unsettling turns within these walls, fueling talk of a relentless curse. Folks claim to hear phantom footsteps and hushed voices echoing in the corridors, as if past residents are trying to warn newcomers. Some guests insist they've felt an overwhelming sorrow weigh on them the moment they cross the threshold, and for years there's been a rumor that no occupant truly leaves unscathed. Today it operates as a restaurant and inn, but stories of unexplained shadows and strange breezes still keep people on edge. Next we are talking about the Drish House in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. There's something about the Drish House that refuses to blend into the background, no matter how many times you drive by. Built in the early 1800s, it was once a symbol of Tuscaloosa's elegance, a stately home wrapped in tall columns and framed by sprawling grounds, yet beneath its graceful appearance lurks a story that locals have passed down in hushed tones. One of the key points of intrigue revolves around a set of candles kept for a significant funeral, which were supposed to be saved for the next time the household found itself in grief. It's said that after the original resident passed, those candles took on a life of their own, casting strange glows in the upper tower windows on random nights and puzzling anyone who ventured close. Over time, rumors about restless figures drifting through darkened rooms turned the Drish House into a magnet for ghost enthusiasts. Many report uneasy feelings just standing near the structure, as though unseen forces are eager to share their unrest. Changing ownership over the years did little to dissolve its mystique, and each new caretaker added fresh tales to the local local lore. Certain residents confided they never fully escaped the sense of being watched, even in broad daylight. Doors would swing shut with no explanation, footsteps echoed in hallways emptied of people, and an icy heaviness seemed to grip the air whenever dusk settled. The building itself fell into disrepair at various points, narrowly avoiding demolition thanks to last-minute deals and oddly timed coincidences that some believed weren't coincidences at all. Today it stands partially restored, serving as a silent reminder that not everything can be packed away neatly into history. Next, we are talking about the Summerwind Mansion in Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin. Perched by a quiet lake, Summerwind Mansion looks picturesque at first glance, but a string of eerie events has given it a fearsome reputation. Financial ruin haunted nearly every person who tried to restore the place, and bizarre sightings only add to the tension. Former residents have whispered about shadowy figures drifting through corridors and unsettling noises in rooms that should be empty. To make things even stranger, the house was struck by lightning before eventually burning down, and many attribute that dramatic end to the so-called Summerwind curse. Although it's now mostly ruins, locals share stories of the mansion's restless energy, warning outsiders to tread carefully or face a fate that's tough to escape. Next, we are talking about Franklin Castle in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland's Franklin Castle might be the most imposing home in the city, complete with turrets, gargoyles, and a history steeped in unexplained sorrow. Hidden passageways and secret rooms have long fascinated visitors, but they also spark rumors of clandestine activities. Over the years, occupants reported a constant sense of being watched, and many owners never seemed to stay for long before packing up under very tense circumstances. Doors that slam on their own and eerie whispering sounds make it feel like the walls themselves hold grudges against anyone who enters. Locals whisper that no household has truly thrived here, claiming the place simply refuses to let happiness grow. Next up, we are talking about the House of Death in New York City, New York. They say New York never sleeps, and the same might be true of the apparitions said to roam the infamous House of Death. Standing quietly on West 10th Street in Greenwich Village, this brownstone has garnered an unsettling nickname thanks to countless spooky tales. Some visitors report drifting orbs of light, unexpected cold spots, and fleeting visions in mirrors that vanish as quickly as they appear. The long roster of residents who left under bizarre or distressing circumstances has convinced many that the building harbors a malevolent force. Despite its prime location, rumors suggest no one can truly find peace here, as if the house itself decides who stays and how they leave. Next, we are talking about the Kreischer Mansion in Staten Island, New York. A grand Victorian home on Staten Island, Kreischer Mansion once symbolized prosperity, but soon descended into a spiral of misfortune. Commissioned by a wealthy brickmaker, the property was marked by sudden setbacks that nod at the family legacy. Over the years, folks have described unsettling footsteps in vacant hallways and lights flickering at odd intervals. A caretaker's grim confrontation on the premises only deepened beliefs that a powerful darkness clings to the mansion. Though it is privately owned today, local lore insists anyone spending significant time here risks being caught in a cycle of endless turmoil. Next, we are talking about S.K. Pierce Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts. This striking Victorian manor boasts ornate woodwork and an impressive facade, but it's the tales of restless shapes drifting through rooms that truly capture people's attention. Built by a prominent furniture magnate, the home saw a chain of unfortunate incidents that left behind a cloud of mystery. Paranormal investigators talk about furniture moving on its own, doors locking unexpectedly, and voices calling out in empty hallways. The oddest detail is how often people try to renovate or move in, only to find themselves fleeing with unsettling stories and and a lingering sense of dread. Rumor says nobody can endure the mansion's atmosphere for long, as if intent on breaking every spirit that dares to settle there. Next, we are talking about the Baker Mansion in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Baker Mansion stands as a classic symbol of both grandeur and heartbreak, thanks to a local legend about a wedding gown that allegedly moves behind glass. A daughter of the original owner never realized her dream of marital bliss, and some say her spirit now roams the halls, reminding guests of a love that went unfulfilled. Clanging sounds late at night and a persistent chill in certain rooms have prompted believers to call this place distinctly haunted. Tour guides joke, somewhat nervously, that the mansion's energies can turn on you if you ignore its history. Those who linger too long often claim they leave feeling weighed down by a sorrow they can't quite explain. Next, we are talking about the Farnsworth House Inn in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. A historic lodging near one of America's most famous battle sites, Farnsworth House Inn has a vibe that feels suspended between past and present. Soldiers reportedly took shelter here during a major conflict, and countless stories describe the spirits of those who never found peace after the fighting ended. Guests have claimed to see figures in old-fashioned uniforms strolling the halls, accompanied by muffled sounds of marching boots. Nighttime can be especially tense, with doors creaking when no one's around, and echoes that defy logical explanation. Many stay a single night for the thrill, but local gossip holds that if the atmosphere latches onto you, moving on unscathed is not guaranteed. And finally, on our list today, we are talking about the Sorrel Weed House in Savannah, Georgia. Few places in Savannah rival the Sorrel Weed House for sheer paranormal reputation, with visitors repeatedly claiming unseen hands brush against them in dimly lit rooms. This stately mansion boasts classic Southern architecture, but it's overshadowed by tales of bitter disputes and unexplained passings. Voices drift through the air in hushed tones, and tour guides say they've heard footsteps follow them, only to find empty halls behind them. Psychic mediums who visited speak of an ominous energy that clings to certain corners, as if unwilling to loosen its grip on anyone who steps foot inside. Rumor has it that once this house sets its sights on you, life might never feel the same again.
The St. Augustine Lighthouse has been standing tall since the 1800s, and it has quite a creepy reputation. There have been a number of strange occurrences and incidents here throughout its history. One of its earliest keepers, Peter Rasmussen, loved his cigars, and some folks claim they can still catch a whiff of his favorite scent lingering around the lighthouse. Then there's another keeper, Joseph Andrew. People will catch glimpses of him looking down from the top of the tower. The thing is, though, he died over 100 years ago. He died after he fell while painting the tower. The most haunted tale, though, is that of the Pitti sisters, Mary and Eliza. They'd been playing in a cart used to carry materials back and forth to the lighthouse, but it broke loose, sending them tumbling into the water. Even after 150 years, there are reports of giggling and playful laughter echoing from the tower late at night, believed to be the spirits of the young girls. Some even claim to have spotted them floating around the bay.
Step into the Florida Theater in Jacksonville, Florida, and you might feel the lingering echo of its past. A past that doesn't just sleep when the lights dim. Built on the grounds of an old police station in 1926 and opening its doors in 1927, this historic venue carries whispers of its earlier days. Visitors and staff share unsettling stories of strange shadows flitting across the balcony and mysterious shapes that show up in photos as if someone or something refuses to be forgotten. Most chilling of all are the rumors swirling around the ghost of an old projectionist whose spirit is said to still wander the halls long after the final credits have rolled. Despite the efforts of paranormal experts who came to debunk these ghostly claims, they instead left with more questions than answers, having encountered eerie phenomena that suggest something truly unworldly haunts the Florida Theater. It's a place where the past doesn't just haunt, it holds court, making the theater not just a spot for a show, but a doorway to the mysterious and the unknown.
What I've learned doing these lists is that if you die in a movie theater, a park, a hospital, like your ghost, you're staying there for the rest of the time. You never hear like about a haunted laundromat or something like that. I don't know. Key West Cemetery, 100,000 or so corpses are buried here, all packed into the 19-acre space. The cemetery was built back in 1847 after a hurricane wreaked havoc on the island, and this cemetery has seen it all, from the tragic victims of that natural disaster, soldiers of the Spanish-American War. There's a whole lot of history here. Now, aside from all the ghosts that are said to roam around here, and there are a lot, this is also the cemetery at the center of one of the most insane, creepy tales in American history. This is the cemetery where Carl Tanzler dug up Elena Milagro Hoyos. He was obsessed with her, and after digging up her body, he tried to preserve her. He kept her in his home and would even sleep next to her. Yeah, creepy. But who are some of the ghosts that are said to lurk here? First, there's the Bahamian woman. Folks say she appears both day and night, and unlike ghosts that just vanish into thin air, this one is much more abrasive. She's pissed pretty much all of the time, but especially if she catches you disrespecting the graves. Sit on a tombstone, stomp across a plot, and she may show up. There's also the story of the young girl's voice. Visitors have told stories of wandering through the cemetery and when they suddenly hear a small voice calling out to them, and then they follow it. Only when they finally reach the source, they simply find the grave of a young girl.
I read that there's also a gravestone in there that says, "I told you I was sick." Which, I love that. Be petty even in death. Whatever. On a remote island within the dry Tortugas, Fort Jefferson stands as quite the structure, as it was built from 16 million bricks. It's just a crazy fact. Originally constructed to protect and guide ships navigating the treacherous waters of the Florida Straits into the Gulf of Mexico, this massive fort has morphed through history from a vital military stronghold to a shadowy, haunted relic. As the Civil War raged, the fortress transformed into a grim prison housing Confederate captives, sealing its fate as a site steeped in dark tales and tragic events. Today, Fort Jefferson is not only a major tourist draw, but also a reputed epicenter of ghostly encounters. Imagine a place where every conceivable horror has occurred, including executions, people eating, deadly disease outbreaks, you name it, this place has seen it. It's said that inmates turned on each other with makeshift weapons, and the surrounding waters claimed the lives of those trying to escape. Among its notorious residents was Dr. Mudd, the physician whose legend says treated President Lincoln's assassin. Imprisoned at Fort Jefferson, he became a pivotal figure during a virus outbreak that claimed 38 lives. His medical interventions spared many more, and today paranormal enthusiasts and skeptical reporters flock to the fort, some armed with photos they claim capture spectral glares, potential proof of the supernatural.
The most haunted building in Tampa is said to be the Cuban Club. This place isn't just famous for one or even a handful of ghosts. Some say there are hundreds, which is too many ghosts. The Cuban Club was built in 1917 as a social services organization for Cuban immigrants, hence the name. There was all sorts of stuff here. There was a bowling alley, a spa, a restaurant, a swimming pool, even a theater, and that theater is where our first ghostly tale begins. An actor took his own life on stage sometime in the 20s. He'd forgotten his lines, and this was just the last straw. He ended it right there. I don't know how exactly. There's probably very different versions of the story, but point is he died. Now some say his spirit still hangs around the theater, unable to move on. Then there's Little Jimmy, the ghost of a boy who drowned in the club's swimming pool. His spirit is said to mess with flashlights and appear in photographs taken when the club is empty. And there are a number of other nameless ghosts. Some say there's the energy of two former board members who had a falling out, with one firing at the other in anger. Sometimes the pianos are also said to play by themselves, and there's the ghostly spirit of a woman in a white dress who wanders the halls. One staff member told a story about a woman visiting the building having been so frightened at the sight of her that she fell to her knees crying.
Highway 666, the 6th branch of the famous Route 66. It really doesn't get more never drive at 3 a.m. than this. Today, the highway is known as Highway 191. The name was changed due to the belief that the many accidents, apparitions, and creepy mishaps were caused by the highway having adorned the devil's number for so long. Unfortunately, however, changing the name has not changed the nature of the road, which remains haunted, dangerous, and incredibly creepy to this day. Phantom trucks, ghostly passengers appearing in back seats, see-through hitchhikers in torn white gowns, and hellhounds ready to rip the rubber directly off of your tires are a common sight for those driving along the roadway at night. One woman recounted a drive she had taken along the highway with her husband, saying, "At first everything seemed normal. Her and her husband were the only ones on the road when all of a sudden a massive truck appeared out of nowhere that seemed as though it was headed straight for the pair, charging so fast towards them that sparks were flying from the wheels and flames were coming out of the smokestack. The pair pulled off the road and waited for the truck to pass, and when it did, it disappeared into the night." I'm gonna go ahead and say avoid this roadway at night if you and your tires, which like I said are subject to be ripped apart by literal hellhounds, want to make it to your destination in one piece.
There are plenty of haunted hotspots along Route 66, but one of the most famous is an abandoned truck stop in Villa Ridge, the Tri-County Truck Stop, which opened in 1971 and closed in 2006. Ever since its closing though, people have reported strange stuff going on at the site, and there have been plenty of paranormal investigations in the abandoned building. A team of paranormal investigators called the Paranormal Task Force investigated the site in 2006, and the guy leading the investigation, Greg Myers, said they experienced some pretty weird stuff. Almost as soon as they arrived, a coffee pot came flying off a shelf. It's a nice welcome. He also added, quote, "On the first night we were setting up a camera on the second floor. I was holding a door shut and something was trying to open it from the other side. We were actually fighting back and forth." Other investigators have spotted a man in red flannel in the bathroom vanishing as soon as he's spotted, and other objects like light bulbs being hurled. And people have also apparently seen orbs and spectral shapes floating through the building, some which have been caught on camera.
Dead Man's Curve, located in Claremont County in Ohio. The curve is a turning intersection, a dangerous one where Route 222 meets State Route 125, and it's also said to be the most haunted place in all of Ohio. Although there have been many deaths at the intersection, the majority of hauntings are attributed to 5 young men who were killed there on October 19th of 1969 after their 1968 Impala was hit head-on by a 1969 Roadrunner going more than 100 miles an hour. Since then, the curve has been haunted by the deceased young men who appear as faceless hitchhikers hoping to catch a ride from someone who can take them away from the place where they met their grisly end.
Next, we head to Rachel, Nevada with Route 375. This is a pretty notorious stretch of road, known for its supposed extraterrestrial activity. So much so that it's been nicknamed the Extraterrestrial Highway. UFO fanatics from all of the world flock here year after year, hoping to catch an unidentified object in the sky or hopefully find some clue as to what's really going on in Area 51. Driving along this road, you'll get closer to the place than you'd probably ever hope. Now, aside from Area 51 though, there are other interesting spots along the route. There are old atomic bomb sites, lots of other military facilities, and on top of all the alien stuff, there's said to be plenty of paranormal weirdness, vanishing apparitions along the road, phantom headlights, and for everyone with a clown phobia, you may want to make sure you plan your route so that you don't end up having to spend a night at the Clown Motel, which is exactly what it sounds like. A clown-themed motel filled with ceramic clown dolls, puppets, life-size statues, you name it. Definitely where I'd be wanting to spend the night, but maybe not for everybody.
Highway 5, located in Lynn, Alabama. It was what was once a normal highway became a hotbed head for paranormal activity after a young woman was killed one night in the late 20th century. A young woman and her boyfriend had been making their way home from prom when the pair got into a vicious fight. Not being able to bear another moment spent arguing with her partner, the woman decided to exit the vehicle, and in a fit of anger, her boyfriend drove off, leaving her all alone in the middle of the night on an empty highway with no shelter, sidewalks, or anyone to help for miles around. She was determined though, and so she began walking along the highway in hopes of making it home by sunrise. Unfortunately, however, she was struck by a truck in a hit and run and left to spend the rest of the night dying a slow, painful death in a ditch next to the road. Her body was discovered the next morning, and her spirit has been there ever since. She's been seen walking along the highway aimlessly in the hopes of one day being able to finally make it back home to her family. Those who see her on the road and stop for help are greeted with a pretty creepy sight of a woman mangled and distressed who disappears when they finally get close enough to speak to her.
Route 2A in Maine is said to be one of the most haunted stretches of road in all of the US. Not only do you have loads of ghost stories, but it really is a pretty dangerous road. Lots of deadly accidents have happened here, especially in the winter, where the conditions are said to be absolutely brutal. Tons of sharp turns and blind corners, so it's a pretty notorious road as is. One of the most famous ghost stories is the Screaming Woman. A number of travelers driving along the road at night will report spotting a woman screaming by the side of the road, desperate for help, saying that her husband is trapped in a car wreck, so she asks to be driven further up the road where the accident is, but somewhere along the journey, the woman disappears. The story goes that one winter night, a newly married couple was driving along the road when they swerved and hit a utility pole. The husband was killed instantly, but the woman was thrown from the vehicle. She limped along the road for a while in search of help, but there were no other vehicles. Eventually, she collapsed and died from the cold.
Zombie Road, the most haunted road in Missouri, located in Willwood, Missouri, just west of St. Louis, if you know it. Today, Zombie Road is not so much a road as it is a series of trails, but at one point it was a road, and that is why it is on this list today. Zombie Road was originally constructed in the 19th century, but it was shut down in 2010 to be repurposed as a bike path. Big mistake. Prior to the road being converted into a trail, Zombie Road is rumored to have been home to a crazed killer who escaped from a nearby asylum during the 1950s. He lived out the rest of his days hiding in shacks around the road and preying on young men and women who were unfortunate enough to have been walking around the area. Eventually he died, but unfortunately, according to legend, that didn't stop his reign of terror, because it is believed that the crazed man went on to continue his killing spree in the afterlife, which is how the road came to be known as Zombie Road. When the road was converted to trails, it seems as though the spirit of the man, along with the spirits of his victims, became quite pissed off, because instances of paranormal activity in the area became so bad that city officials were forced to create strict hours of operation for the trail that forbid entry after dark. If you've been, let me know.
A name like Shades of Death Road doesn't really inspire a whole lot of confidence now, does it? At least not in your safety. This road in New Jersey is said to be one of the most haunted places in the entire state. Even before motorized vehicles were a thing, this place had a dark reputation. There were some very violent incidents that took place along here. In the 1920s and 30s, there were some pretty famous incidents. The creepiest, though, is probably the woman who lobbed off her husband's head and then buried both parts of his body on either side of the road. Just off the road is a pretty famous lake too, Ghost Lake, which gets its name for a pretty obvious reason. Spooky stuff happens there. Oh, and there's ghosts. Apparently there's often said to be an eerie fog surrounding the lake, and the sky is perpetually bright, even in the middle of the night, almost like it's always twilight.